Chapter 126. In the northern Meng camp, in front of the commander's tent, Fan Lingyue looked in the direction of the imperial city of Great Xia. There, the purple fate was getting darker and darker, indicating that the situation of Great Xia did not turn for the better. Instead, it was getting worse. However, there were only a few people in the world who knew the art of aura viewing. Most people knew nothing about it. Military advisor. Qing Wuyo opened his mouth and wanted to ask, but he didn't know how to start. He really couldn't understand why the military advisor kept giving in during the negotiation. Could it be that they really wanted to make peace with Great Xia? Don't ask too much. Now is not the time. You will know why soon. Fan Lingyue didn't explain further. The situation of Great Xia had not reached its worst yet. She had to continue waiting. Now, the biggest hidden danger was that Ning Chen was not dead and had returned to the imperial palace of Great Xia. This was what she was most worried about. Many times, the impact of one person's existence on the overall situation was beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Who would have thought that the losing side in the War of Buddha Kingdom would be the abbot of Du-Yi Temple? It was a well-known fact that the three calamities were invincible. Except for experts of the same level, he was almost invincible. However, such an expert was still defeated. He was defeated miserably and miserably. Although she never expected the Buddha Kingdom to have such a big impact on the war against Great Xia, she didn't expect it to be defeated so quickly. In the Weiyang Palace, Ning Chen was still unconscious and was unaware of the changes in the situation outside. The third prince and the 10th prince were trying their best to rope in the remaining nobles who were still neutral. At this time, no one was willing to fall behind. The battle for the throne had always been about the winner taking all. When one person ascended the throne, the other would definitely die without a burial place. This was also the main reason why the princes couldn't coexist. There was no kinship in the royal family. This had never changed since ancient times. After all, there were very few people who didn't care about the throne like the first prince and the Yan Qinhuang. In the court, other than the two princes fighting, there was another matter that was also placed in front of the officials. How would the Marquis Jiming be rewarded for his contributions? The origin of the Jiming Marquis was an unspoken secret. Everyone pretended that they didn't know. No one was foolish enough to mention it at this time. In the Battle of the Buddhist Kingdom, Jiming Marquis had shocked everyone. The dignified Buddhist kingdom was basically destroyed. The Buddhas in the mortal world suffered a crushing defeat, 3 Buddhist kingdom protectors died in battle, and all the precious ancient scriptures in the entire Mijia mountain were pulled back to Great Xia. It could be said that the peace of the southwest region of Great Xia was won by Jiming Marquis and his 5,000 soldiers. If this matter was not handled properly, it would definitely disappoint the soldiers of Great Xia. Hence, the matter of bestowing rewards became a huge headache for the 3 dukes. When the Xia emperor was still alive, he had suppressed Ning Chen time and time again. They had never considered this problem. Now that they were counting the merits of Ning Chen, they realized that unknowingly, this young man had already done so much for the Grand Xia. Everyone in court was paying attention to this matter, waiting for the final decision of the 3 dukes and the empress. Logically speaking, with such merits, he could already be considered for the title of Marquis. After the death of Marquis Wangchuan, one of the 10 marquises of Great Xia was empty. Jiming Marquis' strength and merits were enough to meet the requirements. 3 days later, the decision of the 3 dukes was finally made. Ning Chen was conferred the title of Marquis, and his title was still Jiming. The moment this decree was released, the court was shocked. Especially the 3rd prince and the 10th prince, who immediately looked at Weiyang Palace. Everyone knew how much power and influence a marquis had, especially when this marquis was the most trusted person of the empress. The final decision of the emperor's selection was in the hands of the 3 dukes and the empress. Winning the support of Jiming Marquis was equivalent to winning the empress's crucial vote. For the next few days, the 2 princes took the opportunity to visit Ning Chen in Weiyang Palace every day. Unfortunately, the latter was still unconscious, which greatly disappointed the 2 princes. "How long are you going to hide?" Xia Zi looked at Ning Chen on the bed and asked. I don't know. I'll hide as long as I can. Ning Chen coughed as he replied. He had woken up 2 days ago, but because of the situation outside, he didn't show himself. As for whether or not he was conferred the title of Marquis, he didn't care. Zhang Sun also didn't mention it. If the first prince hadn't told him, he wouldn't have known about it. First prince, I still owe you an apology. Ning Chen's pale face flashed with an apologetic expression. In the entire imperial palace, the only person he felt guilty towards was the first prince in front of him. You don't owe me anything. You don't need to apologize to me. Everything was done voluntarily by me. It has nothing to do with anyone else. Xia Zi calmly said. Hearing this, Ning Chen deeply sighed. How could such a person be born in the imperial family? Mingyue, come here. Ning Chen waved his hand. Not far away, little Mingyue, who had been sitting at a table, heard the call and immediately ran over. Help me get my sword. Ning Chen pointed at a cabinet not far away. Oh. Mingyue ran over to the cabinet in front of the window and grabbed the ink sword scabbard. She tried, but couldn't lift it. Ning Chen laughed involuntarily. He had forgotten that this thing was still too heavy for little Mingyue. Seeing this, Xia Zi waved his hand and the ink sword flew out and landed next to the bed. The ink sword had already broken in two. It had been destroyed during the battle with Du Yi Temple's abbot, and even now, he hadn't had the time to repair it. First Prince, I've heard that the Confucian sect has a special forging technique. Is it possible to repair this sword? Ning Chen seriously asked. Xia Zi carefully examined it and nodded. There is, but this sword's material is special. It should be difficult to repair. After saying that, Xia Zi paused for a moment before continuing, I can help you bring the sword back to the Confucian sect to try it out. It might take some time. Then I'll have to trouble you. Ning Chen sincerely thanked him. This sword had followed him step by step until now, and it had a special meaning to him. If possible, he wanted to repair it as best as he could. All right, it's getting late. I'll be leaving first. Rest well. Seeing that the sky was gradually darkening, Xia Zi picked up the ink sword and bid him farewell. Okay. Ning Chen nodded. Suddenly, he seemed to think of something and said, First Prince, wait a moment. This is a Buddhist cultivation technique I obtained from Du Yi Temple's abbot. Perhaps it will be of some help to you. He knew that the Buddhist and Confucian sects had many similarities in terms of their teachings and cultivation techniques. The unbreakable Vajra body cultivation technique wasn't very useful to him, but it might be very useful to the first prince, who came from the Confucian sect. Many thanks. Xia Zi didn't refuse and took the cultivation technique. This thing was indeed very useful to him. After the eldest prince left, Qing Ning pushed open the door and entered. She looked at Ning Chen with a strange expression and said, When did you become so generous? Ning Chen awkwardly rubbed his nose. Wasn't he just feeling guilty? That's right. Big sister Qing Ning, isn't it inappropriate for me to stay in Weiyang Palace? After all, he was no longer a eunuch. If he stayed here, it would be troublesome for Zhang Sun. This consort isn't afraid, so what are you afraid of? At this moment, Zhang Sun walked in and reprimanded him. Ning Chen immediately shut his mouth. After getting injured, he discovered that his perception had decreased a lot. He didn't even notice that Zhang Sun had arrived. As of now, Zhang Sun was already annoyed enough by the two princes. He didn't dare to go against them. It was better to keep a low profile. How is your body? Are you feeling better? Zhang Sun calmly asked. Much better. Ning Chen nodded. I'm sure Zi has already told you about the Marquis position. In the future, the third prince and 10th prince will definitely think of ways to rope you in. Be careful. Zhang Sun warned. Okay. Ning Chen nodded again. Tomorrow, you can leave the palace. The new Marquis government has already been prepared for you. In the future, you will also be a Marquis of Xia. You must pay attention to the rules when you speak. Okay. Ning Chen continued to nod. Alright, go rest. This consort still has matters to attend to and doesn't have time to care about you. Tomorrow, you can leave the palace on your own. After saying this, Zhang Sun left without stopping. She didn't even have time to sit down and drink some water. Has Nyang Nyang always been this busy? Seeing Zhang Sun leave, Ning Chen softly asked. Yes, it's been like this for several days. As she spoke, a trace of worry flashed across Qing Ning's face. She was truly worried that Nyang's body wouldn't be able to take it. Ning Chen frowned slightly. It seemed that the matter of the two princes was more troublesome than he had imagined. What Xia was most afraid of right now was a mutiny. One of the two princes would definitely be eliminated in the struggle for the throne. No matter who it would be a big hidden danger for Xia. Sister Qing Ning, what's the situation in Beichui City? Ning Chen suddenly remembered the letter that Zhang Sun had sent him in the Buddha Kingdom. After so long, he had almost forgotten about it. The Marquis of Taiping and the Northern Meng military advisor have already been negotiating for a period of time. The progress has been very smooth. The Northern Meng military advisor has ordered the army to retreat by 100 li. Furthermore, he has repeatedly expressed his sincerity in negotiating. Qing Ning truthfully told Ning Chen what she knew of the situation. She didn't understand military matters and couldn't see anything unusual. Hearing this news, Ning Chen frowned again. Previously, he wasn't in Xia and didn't see the situation clearly. Now, the situation was gradually becoming clearer. Based on his understanding of Fan Lingyue, the matter of the peace talks was definitely a facade. If he didn't guess wrongly, Fan Lingyue was trying to numb Xia, making Xia lose the strong sense of crisis that they had always felt. The Northern Meng army was an external threat. If the external threat was too strong, Xia would have no choice but to deal with it with all their might. The two princes would also temporarily stop fighting. Otherwise, Xia would be destroyed. However, now that the external threat had weakened, the internal threat would erupt without reservation. Both princes wanted to sit on the throne of Xia Emperor. It was destined that it would be impossible for them to compromise. It was very likely that Fan Lingyue was waiting for the internal threat of Xia to erupt completely. This was why he repeatedly showed weakness. Ever since the assassination of the Xia Emperor, this plan had already begun. However, the sudden invasion of the Buddha Kingdom had attracted all the attention of Xia, causing them to have no time to carefully consider this matter. Chapter 127. Ning Chen sat on the bed, carefully going through the situation. He couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. Fan Lingyue had long planned all of this. The Buddhist kingdom was merely a chess piece used to attract the attention of Great Xia. However, none of them realized it. Instead, they thought that the Northern Meng army was afraid after defeating the Buddhist kingdom. The current situation was very similar to when Northern Meng first invaded. At that time, the Xia Emperor hoped to use external forces to draw out internal troubles and then resolve them together. Unfortunately, the Xia Emperor overestimated himself and also underestimated Fan Lingyue. Driving the tiger to attract the wolf, but he had no ability to subdue the tiger. Now, the situation in Great Xia had stabilized. The two princes wanted to first defeat their opponents and ascend to the throne before driving the Northern Meng army out of Great Xia. Especially after Northern Meng repeatedly showed signs of peace talks, this idea would only grow faster. Humans would always have too much confidence in their own abilities. No matter who it was unavoidable. Fan Lingyue used this weakness of human nature to force Great Xia into desperation again and again. This time, it would most likely be the same. He had no way to stop it. Even if he guessed Fan Lingyue's intentions, it was already too late. Regardless of the third prince or the 10th prince, it was impossible for them to turn back. The battle for the throne would only become more and more tragic. Thinking of this, Ning Chen closed his eyes and leaned weakly against the headboard. Fan Lingyue was indeed the most terrifying person in the world. He had already tried his best, but he still couldn't help Great Xia turn the situation around. Since the start of the war between the two dynasties, Great Xia had been led by the nose. His existence only delayed the worsening situation of Great Xia for a little longer. Now, almost half of the 330,000 imperial guards in and outside the imperial city were in the hands of the two princes. These imperial guards were the elites of the Great Xia dynasty, and their combat strength was far from what an ordinary army could compare to. At this time, it was impossible to stop the two princes. How to minimize the consequences of the battle for the throne was the most important thing. One of the princes had to die. This was the only and simplest way. Although it sounded simple, it wasn't simple at all. In the long battle for the throne, the two princes had already gathered a large number of experts around them. In addition to the military strength in their hands, how could they just kill them? Moreover, in this world, who would dare to extend the butcher's knife to the princes? Neither the three dukes nor Zhangsun dared to give such an order. Outside, the sun had already set, and the night was gradually rising. A palace maid brought the dinner into the room. Mingyu had already washed her hands white and was eagerly waiting at the table. The little girl's thoughts were still very simple. The best thing was that the bad guy had woken up. Ningchen tossed aside the worries in his heart and sat on the bed quietly watching little Mingyu eat. "Do you eat?" Mingyu picked up a snack and placed it in her mouth. She felt the bad guy's gaze on her, so she turned her head and smiled. "I'm not hungry." "You can eat." Ningchen shook his head. He really didn't have much of an appetite. He had just eaten some porridge from the kitchen in the afternoon, so he wasn't hungry yet. "Oh," Mingyu replied. Then, she turned her head back and focused on eating. She liked the food in the Great Xia dynasty's palace very much. The way the little girl ate was pleasing to the eye. After all, Mingyu was the emperor of Northern Meng, so her etiquette was impeccable. Ningchen looked at her quietly and didn't say anything. Only when he looked at little Mingyu could he calm down a little and lessen his troubled thoughts. The future still belonged to little Mingyu and the others. All he could do was try his best to preserve the hope of peace. Fan Lingyue's era wouldn't last long. The war between Northern Meng and Great Xia would also end very soon. No matter who won or lost, it couldn't drag on forever. "Mingyu, grow up quickly." Ningchen sighed softly in his heart. Northern Meng and Great Xia couldn't endure the ravages of war anymore. They needed peace too much. Not long later, Mingyu jumped down from the table and ran to the bedside. She arched her eyebrows and said, "I'm full." Ningchen reached out and helped the little girl adjust her little cloth hat. He smiled and said, "If you want to bathe later, just pull the screen. You don't have to be so fierce and chase the little palace maids away. Without my orders, they won't dare to come in." Mingyu's little face immediately turned red. She reached out and hit the former, saying, "You're a bad guy." "Ha!" Ningchen laughed softly and didn't say anything else. Little girls also knew how to be shy. Fortunately, Mingyu was still a child and didn't have so many taboos. If she was a little older, he would have to be more careful when interacting with her. Not long later, a few palace maids and eunuchs brought in a large wooden tub for bathing. After pouring hot water, they left respectfully. Little Mingyu pulled the screen with a red face. Although it wasn't the first time, she still felt a little embarrassed. Ningchen leaned against the headboard and listened to the sound of rushing water not far away. He thought of the woman who had also bathed here in the past. At that time, he had just entered the palace and was scared half to death by an assassin. He made a deal with her. If she didn't kill him, he would save her. He saw the assassin's face. It was a woman, and she was unbelievably beautiful. After that, they protected and supported each other, and did their best to survive in this unfamiliar palace. She was the first person he came into contact with when he came to this world. However, she had forgotten about him now. He didn't know why. He had wanted to go and find the answer, but he couldn't stop worrying about Zhongsun. He was waiting. After the war between the two dynasties ended and Zhongsun stabilized Great Xia, he could leave without worry and do his own things. Little Mingyu quickly finished bathing and came out. She put on her clothes and had a large towel on her head. "Help me wipe." Mingyu handed the towel over and smiled foolishly. "Okay." Ningchen took the towel and wrapped it around the little girl's waist-length hair, carefully wiping it bit by bit. Little Mingyu's hair was very long. A girl's nature of wanting to look beautiful was not something that would disappear just because she was an emperor. "It's done." Ningchen rubbed the little girl's hair and nodded. What a beautiful little girl. When she grew up, she would definitely be prettier than Fan Lingyue. After waiting for less than an hour, Mingyu's hair was almost dry. Ningchen asked someone to come in and move the bathtub away. Then, he patted little Mingyu's cloth hat and said, "Go to sleep. We still have to leave the palace tomorrow." "Okay." Mingyu ran to her bed obediently and lay down with her clothes on. At this moment, Ningchen suddenly felt a tightness in his chest. He covered his mouth and coughed a few times. Traces of blood flowed through the gaps between his fingers. Little Mingyu looked over. Ningchen quickly put down his hand without leaving a trace and covered it with the blanket. "I want to hear a story," Mingyu said eagerly. "Okay." Ningchen suppressed the tightness in his chest and told the little girl the story of Cinderella. As Mingyu listened, she fell asleep. There was a smile on her pretty little face. She was very beautiful and very cute. To little Mingyu, being born as an emperor was not a happy life. On the contrary, she felt very happy these days when she was with Ningchen. No matter what era it was, a little girl of this age would always be the apple of her parents' eye. She would always be held in her parents' hands. However, little Mingyu didn't have parents. She only had to learn how to govern a country and read endless memorials every day. Fan Lingyue knew that she did not have much time left. Therefore, she tried her best to pave the way for little Mingyu. This also increased the little girl's burden. Ningchen and Fan Lingyue had different views. He preferred to use actions and words to educate little Mingyu. He never took the initiative to force anything. This was little Mingyu's most beautiful age. He hoped that the little girl could live happily and not live under a burden every day. The night gradually deepened. Ningchen sat on the bed and quietly thought about the future. No matter what, he had to help his eldest grandson get through this difficult time. Suppressed coughs came one after another. Traces of blood dripped down. He fought with Buddha and survived the calamity of death, but he could not overcome the living punishment. The night passed quickly. After dawn, a carriage appeared in Weiyang Palace. It then carried Ningchen and little Mingyu to the new Marquis residence outside the palace. The two of them left in a very low-key manner. However, they still could not avoid the attention of people who wanted to see them. The third prince and the 10th prince sent over visiting cards on the same day. Ningchen looked at the two cards with almost the same content. His eyes narrowed. They were forcing him to make a choice. His position was destined to not waver for long. Now, other than a few marquises who were fighting outside, basically all the nobles had already taken their positions. He could not stay alone in the imperial court. He was the only marquis in the capital. The two princes would definitely fight for him. A marquis was different from an ordinary marquis. After being granted the title of marquis, they had the right to mobilize an army of less than 100,000. Even the princes could not have this kind of power. The Marquis of the Xia dynasty had the highest prestige in the Xia dynasty. From the first Marquis until now, the Xia dynasty had been fought for with their lives. It could be said that every inch of the Xia dynasty's territory had the blood of the Marquis flowing in it. The Marquis of the Xia dynasty could be hereditary, but the Marquis could not. Every Marquis had outstanding military achievements. Even the traitor Beiwu Marquis was no exception. This was also why the Marquis had such a shocking prestige in the Xia dynasty. It could be said that the power of a Marquis was not given by the imperial court, It was fought for by oneself. Without military achievements that could make the soldiers of the world accept, the right to mobilize an army of 100,000 was just for show. After the visiting card was sent, Ning Chen quickly wrote a reply. The content was very simple. His body was not well and it was inconvenient for him to see guests. He could not see the guests before he made a decision. However, half a day later, another visiting card was sent to the residence. Ning Chen was surprised and frowned. The one who had sent the visiting card was none other than the owner of the Lingyan Pavilion, Yuhan Yi. Not many people knew that he had left the palace. After all, not everyone had the ability to plant spies in the palace. It could be inferred that the person behind Yuhan Yi was not an ordinary person. Ning Chen thought for a moment and also politely refused. If he had not guessed wrong, the real owner of the Lingyan Pavilion was most likely related to one of the two princes. There could not be such a coincidence in the world. He had just refused and another visiting card was sent. Chapter 128. Yuhani didn't give up. The next day, she once again sent the invitation, but this time it was from Li Er. After not seeing her for several months, the little girl had grown a bit taller. The flower bud of the past seemed to be about to bloom, and there was a hint of a young girl's gentleness. 13 or 14 years old was the time for flowers to bloom. Ning Chen didn't want to see these children get caught up in a conspiracy. Yuhani's actions had once again angered him. Li Er, give this letter to your sister Yi. You can't peek. Ning Chen gently patted the little girl's head. Okay. Li nodded. After Li Er left, Ning Chen waved his hand and turned the invitation card in front of him into dust. It seemed that the person behind the scenes couldn't wait to pull him to his side. The battle for the throne had indeed driven these people a little crazy. There was only one sentence in his letter: if you don't want your Lingyan Pavilion, I can help you settle it at any time. In the Lingyan Pavilion, Yuhani felt a chill run down her back when she saw Li Er's letter. She hadn't thought that Ning Chen would be so ruthless as to not give her any face. She didn't doubt the authenticity of the thread in the letter. How could someone who could order the slaughter of tens of thousands of Buddhist disciples care about her little Lingyan Pavilion? How is it? Did he still refuse? A gentle man's voice rang out from behind a screen in the room. Yes. Yuhani respectfully replied. Then forget it. In 2 days, it will be the Empress' birthday. At that time, there will be plenty of opportunities. There's no need to rush now, said the man calmly. Yes. Yuhani lowered her head. In the Grand Sage Manor, the Grand Sage Manor wrote a letter and sent it to the Jiming Marquis Manor. Ning Chen frowned after reading it. What did the Grand Sage Manor mean? In 2 days, the Grand Sage Manor advised him not to attend Zhang Xuan's birthday banquet. It would be better for him to recuperate in his manor. It was impossible for him not to attend Zhang Xuan's birthday banquet. No one could say otherwise. But the two princes would definitely take the opportunity to win him over. That was truly a troublesome matter. Zhang Sun and the 3 dukes still hadn't decided on the next emperor. If he rashly chose now, he would definitely be scolded to death by Zhang Sun. In Duke Jingwu's mansion, Duke Jingwu also wrote a letter and sent it to Jiming Marquis' mansion. The meaning was the same, telling Ning Chen not to attend the Empress's birthday banquet. Originally, they did not want to confer the title of the 10th Marshal Marquis at this time, but Ning Chen's contributions could not be suppressed. While they were worried about the situation in the imperial city, they also had to worry about the feelings of the Great Xia soldiers. However, they definitely did not want to see a Marshal Marquis from the capital participating in the struggle for the throne. The current situation in the imperial city was already chaotic enough. If another Marshal Marquis were to join in, who knew what would happen? When Ning Chen received the letter from Duke Jingwu, he read it and put it aside along with the letter from Duke Taisher. Now that the Confucian head had written a letter from the capital, the next one would be the eunuch head. Sure enough, not long after, Duke Shiyu's letter arrived as well. The contents were exactly the same, telling him to recuperate properly and not get involved in these matters. However, her tone was slightly stiffer. Ning Chen's impression of Duke Xiu was very ordinary. He was even less interested in the commanding tone in the letter. After reading the letter, he crushed it into pieces and had someone sweep it away. In this world, other than Zhang Sun, no one had the right to order him to do anything. The three dukes were no exception. He would definitely attend Zhang Xuan's birthday in 2 days. As for the two princes, he would avoid them if he could. If he could not avoid them, he would just take them on. He could retreat, but it did not mean that he could retreat again and again. The struggle for the throne was not something he should be involved in. However, if he was forced into a corner, he would not care about such trivial matters. He had to listen to the words of his elders. However, it was not a big deal to be willful once in a while. At most, he would just bite the bullet and be scolded. Secretary Shi, the official in charge of recording the history of the Great Xia dynasty, was shocked when he recorded the youngest Marquis of the Great Xia. Ning Chen, spring of the second year of the Great Xia dynasty, was conferred the title of Martial Marquis, knowing destiny. 17 years old. The historian was afraid of making a mistake, so he sent the memorial to the Heavenly Mandate Palace and asked again about the age of the knowing destiny Marquis. After reading it, Zhang Sun only replied with 2 words, "There is no mistake." 2 days later, it was the 39th birthday of the Empress of the Great Xia. There was a family banquet in the 9-Palace Garden. Not many people were invited, but many people came uninvited. Ning Chen was one of those uninvited. He did not receive an invitation. Instead, he received a verbal order from Zhang Sun telling him to recuperate in his residence and not to leave for the next few days. The meaning was obvious. There were already so many people at her birthday banquet. She did not need one more person. Just stay at home and rest. More and more people came to the 9-Palace Garden. They were all powerful officials and their families. The original family banquet quickly became a court banquet. On the main seat, Zhang Sun sat upright. She wore a red and yellow court robe embroidered with gold and silver luan birds and phoenixes. The phoenix in the middle of her bun held a pearl in its mouth. The tassel under the pearl hung down gently. Her beautiful face, which had not been eroded by time, had a gentle smile, giving people a kind of inexplicable pressure. Just as the banquet was about to begin, light footsteps could be heard in the distance. Under many surprised gazes, 2 figures slowly walked over, one big and one small. Pear blossoms drifted down, but they were brushed away by an invisible force, unable to fall on the 2. Zhang Sun frowned without leaving a trace. Why was this guy so disobedient? He was injured and still not obedient. Marquis Jiming. The officials greeted him politely. Looking at the young figure in front of them, they all had different expressions. Ning Chen returned their greetings one by one. Soon after, he brought little Mingyue and bowed respectfully to Zhang Sun. Official Ning Chen greets the Empress. Marquis Jiming may dispense with the formalities. Please take a seat. Under everyone's gaze, Zhang Sun could not say much. She could only do things according to the rules. Thank you, Empress. Ning Chen stood up and took a seat. He then ordered people to deliver the birthday gift for Zhang Sun. Looking at the birthday gift in front of her, Zhang Sun's heart was filled with curiosity. She could not imagine what Ning Chen would give her. She was very clear that this kid did not have any silver. When he was in the palace, his monthly salary was all taken by her. Even the 100 taels of gold awarded by the Xia Emperor was still with her. At that time, she was afraid that he would run around, so she cut off his silver. The officials also looked at the wooden box in front of Zhang Sun. They also wanted to know what this newly promoted marquis would give her. When the wooden box was opened, a white light shone brightly. It was as if a gentle moon had risen in the 9-Palace Garden. Upon closer inspection, a pure white luminous pearl lay quietly in the wooden box. It was the size of a fist and radiated light in all directions. It was perfect and flawless, attracting the gazes of all the women present. They could not shift their gazes away. Zhang Sun was after all the empress. Her knowledge was not something an ordinary person could compare to. After a short moment of surprise, she immediately recovered and gently closed the wooden box. The faces of all the women present flashed with a strong reluctance. They subconsciously looked at Jiming Marquis, their eyes filled with a burning passion. The night pearl was a rare item. The one Jiming Marquis gave was even more priceless. Even if you had money, you would not be able to buy it anywhere. Beside Ning Chen, little Mingyu looked at the burning gazes from all directions. She despised them in her heart. Country bumpkins. Ning Chen naturally did not know what the little girl was thinking. However, in his eyes, this pearl was only used as a candle. It had no other use. He brought back a total of 21 night pearls from the Buddha kingdom. There were 4 large pearls and 17 small pearls. Little Mingyu asked for 2 pearls, 1 large and 1 small. She played with them in the palace every day, making his room lit up all day long. Jiming Marquis, you are very considerate. On the main seat, Zhang Sun said calmly and did not say anything else. It was impossible for him to praise Yi Futian. Yi Futian had come here against orders. How could he let Yi Futian off with a night luminescent pearl? Ning Chen was already used to it. He was not disappointed. It was good that he was not scolded. If he thought of anything else, he would be thinking too much. However, he could see that Zhang Sun liked this gift very much. Women always liked shiny things. Even a little girl like Mingyu was no exception, let alone Zhang Sun. After this brief interlude, the banquet officially began. First, Zhang Sun expressed his thanks to the officials for coming. He said some high-sounding pleasantries, and then the officials responded and continued the pleasantries. More than an hour had passed in the blink of an eye. Ning Chen's head was about to explode. Little Mingyu was also listless. She used to be sick of listening to such things in the palace. She did not expect to be tortured in Great Xia. Below the seats, the 2 princes looked over from time to time. One of them was slightly delicate and had a delicate face. He was dressed in a beautiful black satin robe with golden embroidery. A 4-clawed golden dragon coiled around the robe. His wide sleeves were embroidered with silver threads and dark cloud patterns. He had a white belt around his waist and his black hair was tied up with a white suet jade hairpin. The other one was tall and straight with a domineering aura. He had the aura of a martial artist and was at least rank 9. They were the 10th prince of Great Xia, Xia Mingri, and the 3rd prince, Xia Yanwu. In comparison, Xia Zi, who was sitting at the head of the table, was more low-key. Since he took the initiative to withdraw from the battle for the throne, the status of the eldest prince of Great Xia in the eyes of the officials decreased. Ning Chen just nodded at Xia Zi and pretended not to see the gazes of the other 2 princes. Besides Xia Zi, the 9th princess was still as beautiful as before. Ning Chen also nodded at her as a greeting. In the past, he was helped by the 9th princess when he went out of the palace. Although Xia Xinyu had her own plans at that time, he was indebted to her. The 9th princess nodded in response. She could not help but sigh in her heart. Who would have thought that the little eunuch who asked her for help in the past would become the noblest Marquis of Great Xia? Things in the world were changeable. It made people sigh. The officials present were also very conflicted. They were jealous but also fearful. The matter of the Buddha kingdom was no longer a secret. Under the numerous military exploits, it was hard to hide the ruthlessness of Jiming Marquis, the Buddha kingdom, his subordinates, and himself. In this world, other than Jiming Marquis, there was no other person who dared to lead 1,000 soldiers to attack Mount Mijie. The spies from the Buddha kingdom had already brought back the news. The once prosperous Mount Mijie had now been destroyed. The corpses at the foot of the mountain were so piled up that there was no place to stand. No one dared to look down on the delicate and even slightly immature face in front of them. Because they knew that under this young face hid a cruel and ruthless heart. Others were bullying him, but he was still eating. Qing Ning looked at Ning Chen's uninterested expression. After thinking for a while, she roughly understood what was going on. In the past few months, the opponents he had to deal with every day were at the level of Fan Lingyue and Buddha in the mortal world. Now that he was provoked by a small character like Marquis Anqing, it was normal that he didn't take it to heart. Just like what he had said before, once a person was bitten by a dog, no one would bite back. During the banquet, Ning Chen was forced to stand up by Zhang Sun. He immediately glanced at Marquis Anqing and held back the disgust of biting the dog. He said seriously, "Marquis Anqing, I heard that you have a daughter who is still unmarried. Today, I will formally propose marriage." After speaking, Ning Chen bowed to Zhang Sun and said respectfully, "Empress, I hope you can be a witness." Cough cough. Mingyu choked and almost spat out the loquat in her mouth. The bad guy was really mean. Everyone's expression was also interesting. This time, Marquis Anqing's cleverness backfired. He was asking for trouble. Marquis Anqing only had one daughter who was 15 years old. She was indeed at the age of engagement. Zhangming Marquis' actions were to disgust Marquis Anqing. Granted. Dream on. Zhang Sun and Marquis Anqing spoke at the same time. One was calm and the other was furious. However, this was Great Xia. Zhang Xuan's words were no different from an imperial edict. "Empress, you can't." Marquis Anqing immediately appeared and knelt on the ground. "Why not? Could it be that the Zhangming Marquis status isn't good enough for your daughter?" Zhang Sun coldly snorted. These old bastards were relying on their ancestors' achievements to raise their noses to the heavens. They even dared to mock a martial Marquis of Great Xia. They were truly too arrogant. Because Marquis Anqing was so anxious that his face was covered in sweat. However, he didn't dare say what he was thinking. The eunuchs of Great Xia were not allowed to be given titles. That was a rule passed down by their ancestors. The Great Xia Emperor had broken that rule, but at that time, no one dared to go against him. All the officials had tacitly agreed. Now, if he dared to reveal it, it would be a slap to the Great Xia Emperor's face. "Empress, I misspoke just now. Please retract your order." Marquis Anqing had no choice but to kowtow and beg. He only had one daughter and had always treated her as the apple of his eye. How could he just watch as she was pushed into a pit of fire? Zhang Sun coldly looked at Marquis Anqing. She didn't say anything. If a misspoken sentence could resolve the problem, then she didn't need to be the empress anymore. Whether it was for public or private reasons, this matter couldn't be resolved like this. Publicly, Ning Chen was the martial Marquis of Great Xia. How could he allow others to ridicule him? Privately, Ning Chen had been raised by her. She could beat him or scold him, but others couldn't. "Marquis Anqing, you're getting old. It's time for you to enjoy your life," said Zhang Sun indifferently. An uproar broke out below. Marquis Anqing's body trembled and his face turned pale. "Mother, you can't." The 10th prince immediately walked out to plead. Zhang Sun sneered. As expected, she couldn't sit still. Marquis Anqing was part of the 10th prince's faction. Once he retired, it would be a huge loss for Great Xia Mingri. "Duke Xiyu, what do you think?" asked Zhang Sun calmly. "It's time for someone else to take over the position of Grand Secretary." Duke Xiyu gently waved her fan and replied. He knew that the Empress had already made up her mind. Asking him was just giving him face. He couldn't just ignore that. With that, the matter was settled. Marquis Anqing powerlessly sat on the ground, his gaze lifeless. A single mistake had resulted in such a result. He found it hard to accept. The 10th prince stood up and withdrew. Since the matter was settled, there was no point in pleading. Marquis Anqing had to be given up. During the banquet, the thoughts of the officials spun. It seemed the Empress had been dissatisfied with Marquis Anqing for a long time. But Marquis Anqing was part of the 10th prince's faction. Did that mean the Empress was already leaning toward the 3rd prince? Zhang Sun didn't pay attention to what the officials were thinking. She glanced at Marquis Anqing and indifferently said, since Marquis Anqing isn't willing to marry off his daughter, then I won't force it. This matter will end here. As for Marquis Jiming's marriage, I have my own plans. Ning Chen's heart skipped a beat. He had a bad feeling. Was Zhang Sun going to randomly match him up again? Empress, I'm still young. The marriage can be discussed in 2 years, hastily said Ning Chen. Zhang Sun indifferently glanced at him. Sit down. There's no need to say anything. I know what to do. Ning Chen helplessly sat down. The uneasiness in his heart hadn't subsided. He understood Zhang Suan's personality. She was as stubborn as him. Once she decided on something, it was hard to change her mind. This matter was troublesome. A trace of worry flashed through Qing Ning's eyes. Both of them were people who refused to back down. They wouldn't quarrel over this matter, right? Zhang Sun looked at the officials and asked, the position of head of Department of Justice can't be left empty. Who do you think can take on this responsibility? The officials were silent. After a while, the 10th prince signaled for one of them to come forward and recommend someone. He wanted to do his best to take back the position. However, the 3rd prince's faction immediately objected. They didn't want the position of head of Department of Justice to fall back into the hands of the 10th prince. Soon, the two sides began to quarrel. They even forgot that this was the Empress's birthday banquet. At the head of the table, Xia Zi coldly looked at the repulsive faces of the officials. The wine cup in his hand shattered into pieces. When did the 1,000-year-old Xia become so filthy? The two sides continued to quarrel. One side pushed the other, and neither side was willing to accept the other side's choice. Zhang Suan's expression grew colder and colder. These people really treated the imperial court as their home. They didn't care about anything else and placed their own people in the position. Xia Zi glanced at Ning Chen and said, Ning Chen, you take over the position of head of Department of Justice. This simple sentence didn't cause too much of a stir. However, it shocked the officials present and made them fall silent. Ning Chen furrowed his brows. He wasn't willing to get involved in this matter. Not only that, the name of Taisai wasn't too bad in Grand Xia. His reputation wasn't good to begin with, and he didn't want to add to it. I have no objections. I have no objections. After a short silence, the 10th prince and the 3rd prince spoke at the same time. Their thoughts were simple. Since they couldn't take the position, they might as well use it to win over the Jiming Marquis favor. With the 3 princes speaking at the same time, the officials immediately shut up and didn't say anything else. Zhang Sun thought for a moment, then nodded without leaving a trace. Ning Chen was indeed the most suitable choice. He was smart, skilled, and ruthless. He was very much in line with the head of Department of Justice's style. There were many organizations within the head of Department of Justice that couldn't see the light of day. In Ning Chen's hands, they would definitely be put to good use. Currently, the battle between the 2 princes was becoming more and more intense. She needed to make preparations in advance and obtain more information and battle strength. Do any of the officials have any objections regarding the head of Department of Justice? Zhang Sun asked. I have no objections. The officials all replied in unison. 3 dukes, what do you think? Zhang Sun looked at the 3 dukes and asked. We will follow Her Majesty's arrangements. The 3 dukes replied. Seeing this, Zhang Sun stood up and said seriously, Jiming Marquis, listen up. I am here. Ning Chen helplessly stepped forward and respectfully said. From today onwards, I officially appoint you as the new head of Department of Justice. You will be in charge of all prisons. Zhang Sun said. Thank you, Her Majesty. Ning Chen knelt down to accept the appointment, accepting the most shady position in the Xia kingdom. After the appointment, Xia Zi was the first to stand up and earnestly said, Don't disappoint Imperial Mother. The next moment, the 3rd prince and the 10th prince also stood up and congratulated, Congratulations. Ha! Ning Chen lightly laughed in response to the 1st prince's warning. Then, He cupped his hands towards the two princes without saying anything. Chapter 130. The banquet was still going on. Ning Chen had just returned to his seat when he heard Zhang Sun speak. "Xinyu, go pour wine for the Jiming Marquis." Everyone present trembled. The shock in their eyes was unparalleled. What did the Empress mean by that? At this moment, not only the officials, but even Ning Chen's expression changed. He could ignore other people's opinions and thoughts, but not Zhang Sun. Pouring wine wasn't a big deal, but Zhang Sun had just mentioned his marriage. Now that he had the 9th princess pour wine for him, everyone could see his intentions. Xia Xinyu was also stunned and didn't react for a moment. She even forgot to respond to Zhang Xuan's order. Xia Zi also stood up and was about to speak, but was stopped by Zhang Xuan's stern gaze. At this moment, Qing Ning's voice rang in their ears. A moment later, their expressions changed. Ning Chen's identity as a eunuch was actually fake. Don't make it public. The Empress is still thinking of a way to deal with this matter. Qing Ning continued. The first prince hesitated and looked at his sister. He couldn't decide for Xinyu's marriage. Yes, mother. Xia Xinyu came back to her senses and bowed in response to Zhang Xuan's order. Then she walked over to Ning Chen and poured wine for him. "Jiming Marquis, please." "Thank you, princess." Their gazes met and a light breeze blew past, blowing 2 or 3 pear blossoms between them, blurring their vision for a moment. Ning Chen took the wine cup and drank it in one gulp. Xia Xinyu poured another cup and continued. "Jiming Marquis, Xinyu offers you another cup." The most beautiful woman in the Grand Xia looked at Ning Chen for the first time. Her eyes flashed with a complicated light. "Please." Ning Chen's expression was calm and no one could see the changes in his heart. The 2 cups touched and a crisp sound rang out. Both of them had their own thoughts and drank the wine in their cups. After 2 cups, Xia Xinyu returned to her seat and remained silent. The Jiming Marquis is over 17 years old and has yet to marry. This consort wishes to betroth the 9th princess to you. What does the Jiming Marquis think? As she spoke, Jiming Marquis looked over with a sharp gaze that didn't allow anyone to refuse. This made Ning Chen and Xia Xinyu's hearts sink. The shock on the faces of the officials could no longer be concealed. Even the 3 ministers had strange expressions. The Empress's decision was truly confusing. Ning Chen didn't reply. His mind spun quickly. He didn't understand why Zhang Sun would suddenly have such a thought. What was the reason? Xia Zi looked at his sister with a questioning look in his eyes. Xia Xinyu hesitated for a moment, but in the end, she couldn't resist her inner thoughts and gently shook her head. She and Ning Chen had only met a few times in total. Let alone talk about marriage, they couldn't even be considered friends. At this moment, the 10th prince walked out and said, "Mother, I have something I don't know if I should say." "Speak," Zhang Sun said calmly. Xia Mingri glanced at Ning Chen and said respectfully, "Mother Empress, although Marquis Ji Ming has outstanding military achievements and has been conferred the title of Marquis at a young age, he has been promoted too quickly and is easily envied by others. Now that he is bestowed a marriage, I'm afraid it will be difficult to convince the public. After all, we can't stop people from talking. Imperial Mother, this son also does not agree to this marriage. I hope that Imperial Mother will reconsider." Under the seat, Xia Zi sighed and finally opened his mouth to express his attitude. Since Xinyu didn't agree, he couldn't force it. "Imperial Mother, this son also thinks it's inappropriate." For some reason, the 3rd Prince Xia Yanwu also spoke out against the marriage. After he spoke, the atmosphere quieted down. The 3 princes had reached a rare consensus. None of them agreed to the marriage between Ning Chen and the 9th princess. Everyone looked at Ning Chen. Right now, the decision was in the hands of Jiming Marquis. If he nodded, the Empress had already spoken. No one could oppose it. This was a great favor from the Emperor. Moreover, the 9th princess's status and appearance were impeccable. Jiming Marquis had no reason to refuse. However, a trace of worry flashed in Qing Ning's eyes. She understood Ning Chen. He would never agree to the marriage. However, the Empress's decree couldn't be changed either. Both of them were stubborn. Once they quarreled, the consequences would be unimaginable. Under everyone's gaze, Ning Chen stood up and said seriously, "Empress, please take back the decree. There's no need to say more." "I've already made my decision," said Zhang Sun coldly. She had watched the 9th princess grow up. Before the new emperor ascended the throne, she had to find a good home for the 9th princess. As for Ning Chen, it was time for him to get married. Xinu marrying him was already letting him off easy. Ning Chen's heart was heavy. He knew Zhang Sun had good intentions. In this world, marriage was always decided by the parents. Juniors had no right to interfere. However, he wasn't from this world and couldn't accept this kind of thinking. "Empress, this humble subject already has someone he likes. Forgive me for not being able to comply." Ning Chen walked forward and knelt down. "Impudent!" Zhang Sun was furious. This brat didn't know what was good for him. "Empress, please calm down," said Qing Ning. "Shut up," said Zhang Sun sternly. Qing Ning was helpless. She could only step back. She was afraid this would happen. She didn't think it would still happen. "I'll just ask you one thing. Are you going to marry or not?" Zhang Sun looked at the kneeling Ning Chen. "I'm not marrying." Ning Chen's expression was firm. "Good, very good." Zhang Sun stood up and coldly said, "Come, prepare the carriage to return to the palace." The Empress stood up, and 2 beautiful palace maids stepped forward and walked out of the pavilion with light steps. A golden canopy covered the flying flowers. Under the respectful gazes of all the officials, the golden and silver lawn embroidery fluttered with the wind and slowly flew away. The birthday banquet had begun peacefully, but it also ended peacefully in everyone's hearts. Zhang Sun left the banquet, but the look she gave him before leaving made Ning Chen's heart sink once more. All the officials retreated, and in the end, they all cast their gazes towards Ning Chen. This youngest Marquis of the Grand Xia dynasty could be considered to be in the limelight today. It was just that they didn't know if the emperor's grace would still be as vast and mighty as before after rejecting the marriage proposal. The 3rd prince and the 10th prince walked over to express their goodwill. They also invited Ning Chen to their residence as a guest. No matter what happened today, the Jiming Marquis was still a Marquis. His influence on the future emperor was still immeasurable. Since he couldn't avoid it, Ning Chen didn't back down. He nodded and said that he would pay them a visit. The 2 princes left satisfied. They knew very well that whichever side the Jiming Marquis joined would have the upper hand in the battle for the emperor's position. After everyone left, there were only 4 people left in the 9-palace garden: Ning Chen, Mingyu, Xia Zi, and Xia Xinyu. Mingyu had already fallen asleep by the table. The remaining 3 each had their own thoughts. They didn't speak to each other and just drank silently. The wind blew outside the pavilion and the pear blossoms fell. Gradually, even the path back could not be seen clearly. The sky gradually darkened. The bright moon rose and illuminated the horizon. The bright moonlight reflected the white pear blossoms in the garden, making the 9-palace garden look like a moon palace. It was exceptionally beautiful. In the pavilion, the 9th princess danced in front of the moon. Her beautiful body and perfect face reflected the snow and emitted a sparkling light. Her dress fluttered and spun under the moonlight. She was like a fairy in the world. Her beauty was soul-stirring. "Do you regret it?" Xia Zi suddenly asked out of nowhere. Ning Chen was startled. He immediately laughed lightly and said, "In life, there are things to do and things not to do. Since I've decided, I will never regret it." Lofty sentiments. Xia Zi also smiled. The 2 raised their cups and drank. What they drank was wine, but it was also a display of their appreciation for each other. "I've always heard that the Jiming Marquis' martial prowess is extraordinary, but I've never had the chance to learn from you. Today, the opportunity is hard to come by. How about we fight? Xia Zi looked at Ning Chen, battle intent rising in his eyes. Autumn water flew in front of Ning Chen. Its cold qi was oppressive, reflecting the moonlight. My cultivation body is special. There's no difference whether I have a sword or not. Ning Chen stood up and slowly walked out of the pavilion. His battle intent erupted, causing the sky to fill with snow. Straightforward. With a wave of his hand, autumn water flew out. Xia Zi's figure also shot out. When the sword arrived, the person arrived. When the sword arrived, the person arrived. When the sword arrived, the technique also arrived. It was a short moment, but it was very fast. It was so fast that it was like a killing blow. Ning Chen pointed his sword at autumn water. He leaned slightly to the side and his sword finger slashed towards his heart. Xia Zi swung his sword back and blocked the sword finger. He then turned his sword around and attacked Ning Chen's right chest's death acupuncture point. Ning Chen's sword finger turned into a palm and a vast aura surged out. It passed through autumn water and broke through Xia Zi's chest. Bang! When the palm landed, Xia Zi's figure disappeared. Outside the Nine Palace Pavilion, pear blossoms flew everywhere. The two's figures separated and moved again. Afterimages swirled in the air as their techniques collided once again. Snowflakes, white flowers. The swordsman's brilliance only blossomed in the blink of an eye. The two were evenly matched. The more they fought, the more shocked they became. Inside the Nine Palace Pavilion, the dance had already stopped. Xia Xinyu stood in the pavilion and looked at the two peerless men amidst the snowflakes and white flowers. A dazzling light flashed in her eyes. Straightforward. The sword and palm collided. The wind blew the snow and the cold moonlight sprinkled down. Gradually, the two's cultivation body reached its peak. The boundless sea of learning. Xia Zi took a step forward and a vast aura of righteousness rose around his body. In the next moment, the golden scroll opened and golden words appeared one after another. The dazzling golden words emitted a brilliant light. Immediately, pear blossoms filled the sky. The powerful pressure multiplied. The Confucian school's secret technique had once again appeared in the world. Facing such a powerful technique, Ning Chen didn't dare to be careless. He turned his palm and condensed his qi. A vast wave rose into the sky and turned into the Milky Way. Bang! In the world-shaking collision, the entire garden trembled. Both of them retreated a few steps back. It was actually a draw. Straightforward. With this battle, this trip was not in vain. Looking at each other, they smiled and sheathed their swords. Xia Zi and Xia Xinyu walked away, leaving behind a garden of pear blossoms. Ning Chen carried the sleeping Mingyu on his back and walked away. He sighed in his heart with regret and regret. Of the 4 princes of the Grand Xia, the deceased 8th prince was known as the virtuous king. The 10th prince's literary talent was outstanding and made people look at him in a new light. As for the 3rd prince, his martial arts were unparalleled and his cultivation was comparable to the consecrators in the palace. In comparison, the 1st prince had never shown anything special. Instead, he made people pay more attention to his identity as the eldest son. After today's battle, he realized that the 1st prince was the one who hid the deepest in the Grand Xia. He had forcibly suppressed his sharpness for more than 20 years. If he was ruthless enough to fight for the throne, there would have been no suspense many years ago. Chapter 131. The next day, in Great Xia's Imperial Edict Hall, the sounds of an intense argument could be heard. Outside the hall, regardless of whether it was the palace maids, eunuchs, or guards, they were all frightened. No one dared to step forward for fear of being implicated. In Great Xia, the only person who dared to talk back to the empress was the Jiming Marquis. Qing Ning walked to the front of the hall and had the guards and palace maids withdraw. The group of people hurriedly left as if they had been pardoned. This really wasn't a place for people to stay. Every second was torture for them. You have to marry whether you don't want to or not. This consort isn't dead yet, so it's not up to you to decide. Inside the hall, Zhang Sun shouted angrily. This brat wanted to anger her to death. What was wrong with Xianyu? Which part of her wasn't worthy of him? If you want to marry her, then marry her. No matter what, I won't marry her. Ning Chen was also a bit anxious. How could someone force a marriage like this? Impudent. Zhang Sun stood up and angrily picked up a scroll from the vase beside the table to hit Ning Chen. Seeing that Zhang Sun was about to hit him, how could Ning Chen be willing to stand there and take the hit? Without another word, he ran away while resisting. A gentleman uses his mouth, not his fists. Qing Ning, capture him for me. Seeing that Ning Chen still dared to run, Zhang Sun became even angrier and shouted harshly. Sister Qing Ning, you can't help the evildoer. Ning Chen hurriedly said. Qing Ning felt a headache coming on. She glanced at the two of them, then at little Mingyu who had long since hidden far away. She quickly walked over and also hid to the side. She couldn't participate in this matter. It had nothing to do with her. Are you all rebelling? You don't even care about this consort's words? Seeing Qing Ning's actions, Zhang Sun was furious. These people had all grown up and even dared to not listen to her. Your Highness, please calm down. If there's anything, we can talk it out. Ning Chen isn't someone who doesn't know what's good for him. Qing Ning stood far away and tried to persuade her. These two people had been arguing for almost 2 hours and were about to fight now. She didn't dare to participate in this. In the corner, Mingyu was watching with great interest. In northern Meng, she had never seen such an exciting show. Qing Ning's ears were very sharp. She heard little Mingyu's murmurs and couldn't help but frown. What kind of people were they? Why were all the people who had been with Ning Chen so strange? He knows what's good for him. He is the most ignorant person in the world. Zhang Sun threw the scroll over and said sternly. Ning Chen dodged nimbly and avoided the picture scroll. He said unhappily, marriage is an important matter. Both parties must be willing. I've only met the 9th princess a few times. How can I marry her just like that? Bullshit. Zhang Sun was so angry that he began to curse. Since when did you juniors have the right to make decisions about marriage? There is no such rule in this world. I don't care. Other people are other people. I must decide my own marriage. Ning Chen refused to compromise. Without my approval, I want to see which family's daughter dares to enter your Wuhou government. Zhang Sun said angrily. Ning Chen was exasperated, but he had nothing to say. He had no relatives in this world, and only had his eldest grandson as an elder. If he wanted to get married in the future, he would definitely have to go through his eldest grandson. He was a very traditional person. Marriage had to be blessed by the elders. Whether it was in Huaxia or here, this was a rule that would never change. Nyang Nyang, you must be reasonable. You cannot use your status to pressure others. Ning Chen was not confident enough and emphasized. Mingyu's beautiful face wrinkled. It's over, the bad guy can't take it anymore. Zhang Sun snorted coldly. If this consort was unreasonable, would you even have the chance to act so impudently here? This consort watched Xianyu grow up. Her appearance and character are more than enough to match you. What else are you dissatisfied with? Seeing that the enemy was too stubborn and could not be reasoned with, Ning Chen tactfully changed his reason. Nyang Nyang, I'm only 17. It's too early for me to get married. Moreover, I'm still a eunuch. It's not good for the princess's reputation. Hearing this, Zhang Sun frowned. The first reason was nothing at all. In the Great Xia, many men got married at the age of 16. 17 was not early. However, the second reason had to be considered. This lad's background was indeed troublesome. Xianyu's matter could not be delayed. Before the new emperor ascended the throne, this matter had to be resolved. The imperial family did not have family. While she could still make decisions, she had to find a good home for Xinu. Ning Chen was the best candidate in her eyes. He was also the person she trusted the most. These past few days, she had been thinking of a way. She had to find a reason or arrange a suitable identity for him to shut the mouths of others. This matter is a bit troublesome. Let me think about it a bit more. Zhang Sun frowned as she pondered. Nyang Nyang, take your time. I'm going back first. Ning Chen quickly excused himself. He then gave little Mingyu a look and quickly walked out of the palace. It was impossible to persuade Zhang Sun today. The enemy was too strong. He had to go back and think of a way. The two of them left very quickly and soon disappeared from sight. On the way out of the palace, Mingyu looked at Ning Chen and whispered, "Bad guy, are you really going to marry that ninth princess?" "I won't." Ning Chen denied. Xia Xianyu did not dare to resist, so he would do it. He was already used to being the bad guy. In any case, his reputation had never been good. "Then how will you get past your empress?" Mingyu continued to whisper. "I haven't thought of one yet. Do you have any ideas?" Ning Chen asked. "No." Mingyu shook her head like a rattledrum. "I'm just a child. How can I have any ideas?" Ning Chen did not know what to say. He knocked on his head and said with a headache, "We'll talk about it later. There will always be a way." The two of them walked back to the Marquis' residence. Before they could sit down, an urgent letter came from the distant Buddhist country. Ning Chen immediately opened the letter. After reading it, his expression changed. The abbot of Du Yi Temple had been rescued. This happened 2 days ago. In that case, the Buddha in the mortal world had already been burned in the fire for 7 days. He was actually still alive. Ning Chen carefully read the letter. The letter mentioned that the blood traces on the blood-veined sword had mostly faded. Without a doubt, the abbot of Du Yi Temple had been using the Buddhist energy in his body to resist the resentment of the blood-veined sword. Buddhism and demons were natural enemies. Since the blood-veined sword was basically useless, the Buddha in the mortal world was definitely not in a good state. Even if he was not dead, he would probably be an empty shell of the three disasters realm. Such a person would not be able to threaten De Xia in a short period of time. Moreover, after such a long period of recuperation, the dean's injuries had already healed by 50 to 60%. After a few more days, he should be able to fully recover. Compared to this, he was more concerned about Fan Lingyue of Beimeng. It was about time for her to make a move. Thinking of this, Ning Chen got up and rubbed little Mingyu's head. "Mingyu, you play in the residence. I'm going out for a while." "Okay." Mingyu nodded obediently. After leaving the Marquis' residence, Ning Chen headed east. Walking on the streets of the imperial city, he looked at the bustling people coming and going. He sighed in his heart. Unknowingly, he had already been in this world for close to a year. The sounds of hawking from the stalls on the streets echoed in his ears. Ning Chen looked at the bustling scene in front of him. Step by step, he felt extremely complicated. A year in this world was not long, but it was not short either. Other than this bustling scene that had never changed, everything else had changed. "Brother, I want to eat candied haws." Not far away, a 4 to 5-year-old little girl dressed in green pulled the little boy beside her. A hint of longing flashed through her big bright eyes. The little boy pulled his sister, feeling awkward. He secretly touched his pocket with one hand. There was only 1 copper coin left in his pocket, and it was the money for the buns to go to school tomorrow. However, when he saw his sister's hopeful eyes, the little boy gritted his teeth and took out the copper coin from his pocket. Brother came to this world earlier than his sister because he wanted to take better care of his sister. The little boy bought a candied haws and handed it to the little girl without any hesitation. "Brother, take a bite." The little girl held the candied haws in satisfaction and handed it to her brother. Her big eyes were sparkling. "Brother doesn't like to eat candied haws. You eat it." The little boy secretly swallowed his saliva and resisted the temptation in front of him. Oh! The little girl was not old enough to distinguish between truth and lies. She did not think much and ate the candied haws happily. In the little girl's world, candied haws were the most delicious thing. Looking at the scene in front of him, Ning Chen's face revealed a faint smile. The simplest and most precious thing in the world was the feelings contained in the candied haws. It was like the most beautiful crystal, pure and flawless, without a trace of impurity. However, at this moment, hiya! The sound of horse hooves swept past, and the entire street was suddenly in a mess. The passers-by hurriedly hid, and even Ning Chen was pushed to the side of the street by the panicked people. The red-clothed guards of the imperial court are here to handle matters. Unrelated people, get out of the way. The horses trampled on the street, creating a cloud of dust. The passers-by were frightened, but there was nothing they could do. Suddenly, he heard the sound of crying. Ning Chen turned around and saw the little girl who was pushed to the corner by the crowd. Her eyes were red as she looked at the candied haws on the ground. She was crying sadly. Beside her, the little boy's eyes were dim. Because he had no money in his pocket, he could only pull his sister and leave. Ning Chen's face instantly turned cold. Looking at the departing figures in the dust, his eyes were filled with killing intent. "Boss, give me 2 sticks of candied haws." Walking to the stall selling candied haws, Ning Chen paid and took 2 sticks of candied haws. Then, he came to the little boy and little girl, squatted down and said softly, "Those people just now were Big Brother's subordinates. Big Brother didn't discipline them well. Now, Big Brother apologizes to you on their behalf." The little girl looked at the candied haws in Ning Chen's hand with red eyes. She wanted to take it but didn't dare. She could only look at her brother beside her with difficulty. "Big Brother, Mother told us not to take other people's things casually. It's not good." The little boy was stunned at first, but he still politely rejected Ning Chen's good intentions. Then, he pulled his reluctant sister and left. Seeing the little girl looking back with reluctance, Ning Chen's heart flashed with a rare touch of bitterness. After watching the two of them disappear, an extremely cold killing intent gradually appeared in his eyes. The red-clothed guards of the imperial court, they really put on airs. The imperial court was in charge of the world's punishment prisons. In the past, it was Marquis Qingyu who was in charge. Now that Marquis Qingyu was deposed by the Empress, the position of the head of the imperial court was changed. Unfortunately, he was now the head of the imperial court. Ning Chen walked towards the direction of the imperial court. His face was cold. It had been 2 days. He should go and see his subordinates. Chapter 132. Within the Grand Court, the sound of horse hooves rang out and the door was smashed open. 13 red-robed guards rode their horses straight into the court. Whoosh! The red-robed man stopped his horse. There was not the slightest trace of human emotion on his handsome face. The red mole between his eyebrows was as red as blood and emitted a bewitching light. "Wugo, how is it?" Before they had even entered the Grand Court, an old man opened his mouth. His eyes were closed, and the traces of time were written all over his face. Whoosh! In Yin Wugo's hand, a blood-stained cloth bag was thrown out. It flew into the air and opened up. A human head fell down and landed on the table in front of the blind old man. After giving him his mission, Yin Wugo turned and left. He hadn't said a single word from start to finish. This Yin Wugo is becoming more and more unbridled. He doesn't even have the slightest bit of the Supreme One's rules. An azure-robed middle-aged man coldly said from below the blind elder. But he and the 12 blood-robed guards have never failed a mission. Which of your azure-robed guards can do the same? Across from the azure-robed middle-aged man, a bewitchingly beautiful woman giggled. The middle-aged man snorted and no longer said anything. Although he was displeased, this was an undeniable fact. "All right, stop arguing. Right now we should be thinking about how to deal with this Jiming Marquis that the imperial court sent to me. That's the most important thing right now, said a white-haired old woman across from the blind elder. He's just a brat. What's there to worry about? It's just that his luck was a bit better, said a robust man beside her. Boorish fellow. Across from the robust man, a scholarly man gently waved his fan. Yen Zishu, if you have the guts, then go out and fight. The robust man's expression changed and he angrily slammed the table. Any time. The scholar closed his fan without the slightest fear. Have you quarreled enough? The atmosphere was tense and the blind elder suddenly opened his mouth. The robust man and scholar immediately quieted down. The other people present also didn't dare to say anything. They calmly looked at the old man. This Jiming Marquis isn't simple. Furthermore, I'm sure everyone knows the person behind him, said the blind elder. Her Majesty the Empress. Everyone present thought of the most respected person in the Great Xia dynasty at the same time, and their expressions immediately turned solemn. You want us to endure being manipulated by a brat? I, Jean too, am the first to disagree, raged the burly man. I don't agree either. Yen Zishu tapped his paper fan and agreed with Jean too, which was rare. I don't agree. I don't agree. The beautiful woman and the cyan-clothed middle-aged man also expressed their opinions. Ding Fu, what do you think? The blind old man asked. Can. The white-haired old woman was about to speak when her expression suddenly changed. She said in a deep voice, he's here. Before he could finish speaking, a white figure walked past. In the blink of an eye, she was already there. Her speed was unbelievable. Walking to the front of the main seat, Ning Chen glanced at the four people below and said indifferently, this is our first time meeting. I wonder if you can introduce yourselves to Ning Chen. Yuan Wang. Ding Fu. Zhao Ji. Lu Swan. Jean Tu. Swallow Book. The 6 people stood up and answered respectfully. No matter what, the Jiming Marquis was the head of the Grand Court Division appointed by the Empress and the 3 dukes. They still had to abide by the basic rules. Ning Chen looked at the 6 people in front of him quietly. According to the information of the spies, the entire Grand Court Division was controlled by these 6 people. Yuan Weng and Ding Fu were the 2 leaders. As for the other 4, Zhao Ji was in charge of intelligence, Lu Swan was in charge of money, Jean Tu was in charge of killing, and Yen Zishu was in charge of organizing and guarding the important information in the Grand Court Division. Clear division of labor, orderly hierarchy, decisive killing, and orderly. This was his overall impression of the Grand Court Division. My words are very simple. From now on, this Marquis's words are in charge. Saying this, Ning Chen's aura rapidly rose. He turned his palm and pressed down. An unparalleled pressure suddenly pressed down. When he had just taken office, it was impossible to make the 6 of them sincerely submit. The only method was to ruthlessly suppress them with force. Now, what he needed was not loyalty, but fear of the 6. Ha! The 6 people's expressions changed. They all activated their martial arts to resist the pressure from Ning Chen's body. Ning Chen's expression did not change. He activated the life scroll and at the same time, he secretly increased the power of the other 2 cyclones in his body. For a moment, the temperature dropped and frost appeared. Peng peng peng, the stone floor under the 6 people's feet shattered. Lu Swan, who had a weaker martial arts, had his mouth dyed red. He bent one knee as he could no longer bear the pressure. Humph! Ning Chen's eyes turned cold. He pressed his hand down. Suddenly, the thick earth chi appeared. With a loud bang, the 6 people all knelt down. Their mouths were stained with blood. From now on, the position of the Grand Court Division's head will be inherited by me, Jiming Marquis. I hope everyone will cooperate. Ning Chen waved his hand and withdrew the boundless pressure. He looked at the 6 people kneeling on the ground and said coldly. Yes. The 6 people lowered their heads and answered. Stand up. Thank you, division head. The 6 people stood up and looked at each other. They could see the complicated look in each other's eyes. None of them had expected Ji Ming Marquis to be so strong. However, temporarily enduring was not the first time for them. Can anyone tell me why the Grand Court Division sent out the red-clothed blood guards? Ning Chen's eyes stared straight at the blind old man and the white-haired old woman. Without a doubt, the decision-maker of this matter was definitely one of the two. Although the other 4 each had their own extraordinary forces, their status was temporarily unable to contend against the 2 of them. The city master of Ing City secretly gathered troops and had the intention of rebelling. According to the imperial law, he should be killed without mercy. Yuan Wang respectfully replied. Ning Chen frowned slightly and sneered in his heart. If he believed this, he would be a fool. Everyone knew that the city master of Ing City was unyielding and upright. However, because of this, he had offended many influential people. The number of people who wanted him dead was uncountable. To the Grand Court Division, who was in charge of the imperial law, it was as simple as eating a meal. Who gave the order? Ning Chen did not beat around the bush and directly asked. Yuan Wang and Ding Fu remained silent. Who gave the order? Ning Chen coldly asked again. However, this time, there was a trace of killing intent in his words. Ding Fu sighed softly and said, "It was Marquis Anqing." Hearing this, a bright light flashed in the depths of Ning Chen's eyes. It was now a crucial period in the battle for the throne. Any movement could cause quite a big storm. At this time, killing the city master of Ing City was a must. It was clear that if the Grand Court Division did not kill him, the death of the city master would definitely cause a huge commotion. The imperial court would also send people to investigate. This was the result that the person who gave the order did not want to see. It seemed that it was not a coincidence that he sat on the throne. Summon Yin Wugo. I have something to ask him. Ning Chen collected his thoughts and coldly said to the 6 people. The Grand Court Division, West Hall. The red-clothed Yin Wugo removed the blood sword. His expression was expressionless as he looked out of the silver window. Young master. Shang Han opened the door with a cup of warm water in her hand. She looked at the person in front of the window and softly called out. Shang Han, tell me. Did I kill another good person? Yin Wugo calmly asked. Young master's actions are not right or wrong. In this cruel world, killing people is just to live a better life. Shang Han looked at the already tired young master and couldn't bear to say this. Ha! Yin Wugo turned around and lightly laughed. In this world, only the person in front of him was his last concern. Only Shang Han would care about his happiness. Young master, please wash your hands. Shang Han softly said as she placed the water on the table. Yin Wugo walked over to the table and placed his slender hands in the water. Feeling the waves of warmth from the water, his heart sank even more. How could he wash his blood-stained hands clean? His life had already been destroyed. Did he have any other choice? The Grand Court Division head has ordered for young master to go to the Grand Court. A cold voice rang out from outside the door, breaking the rare silence. Shang Han's expression darkened. She knew that her young master's heart was once again enveloped by coldness. Wearing his red-clothed body, Yin Wugo picked up his sword and expressionlessly walked out the door. Shang Han, I'll have to make you wait alone again. Shang Han, don't be afraid. Young master, be careful. Ha! Yin Wugo pushed open the door and left. His red-clothed body was like blood. The red-clothed body floated over. Ning Chen and Yin Wugo looked at each other from a distance. They both had the same indifference, but different arrogance. After looking at each other, it was time for their auras to collide. One was strong, the other was stronger. Who would submit to the other? Bang! Around the two, the tables and chairs suddenly broke apart. The fragments scattered all over the ground. Extraordinary! Killing intent filled the air. The 6 people's eyes flashed, but they didn't stop him. They wanted to see just how strong this Jiming Marquis was. Dang! His sword finger met the blood sword head-on. The foundation forged by the life scroll was unparalleled. His 2 fingers met the sword's tip without any damage. Ning Chen's figure moved and instantly appeared behind Yin Wugo. His sword finger condensed into a dazzling silver light. His move was swift and fierce, causing everyone's expression to change. Expert. The blood sword turned and blocked the fatal move. Then Yin Wugo's figure quickly turned. His sword moved and his body moved. He didn't fall behind in the slightest. Ding dang. Sword light swirled in the air. Killing intent scattered. The brilliant battle was dazzling. No one could move their eyes away. Ning Chen focused. His sword finger condensed into a dazzling silver light. A waterfall of frost drifted down. The sky was filled with snow. Ha! With a light shout, Yin Wugo didn't dare to be careless. He pushed his cultivation to the peak. Instantly, the red mole between his eyebrows released a demonic brilliance. The scarlet red light dazzled people's minds. The sword genius finally showed his strongest strength. Sword of blood light. The snow was flawless. The blood light was demonic. The two collided. Thousands of sword intents exploded. The two didn't give way. They forcefully resisted the aftershocks. Their auras surged. Yin Wugo and Ning Chen were very close. They could even feel the killing intent and coldness in each other's swords. Since Yin Wugo used his sword, you are the first person that I can't win against. Yin Wugo withdrew his sword. The light from the red mole between his eyebrows disappeared. He immediately knelt down on one knee and said, "Greetings." Ning Chen also withdrew his aura. Looking at the red-clothed youth in front of him, his eyes flashed with admiration. An extraordinary swordsman. However, in the next moment, Ning Chen moved. With a wave of his hand, the silver light surged. In the sky full of snow, the red-clothed youth flew back with a bang. Blood splattered on the ground. Chapter 133. Allowing your horse to disturb the people is just a warning. Ning Chen's expression was terrifyingly cold. The life scroll around him began to circulate on its own. Cold currents surged out, releasing boundless killing intent. Yin Wugo, thanks department head for your tolerance, said Yin Wugo calmly as he wiped away the blood at the corner of his mouth. Yin Wugo's expression was indifferent. There wasn't the slightest anger in his calm eyes. It was as if nothing else mattered. We've risked our lives for the dynasty, but this new department head is actually punishing me over such a small matter. He's really making a mountain out of a molehill. Outside the hall, 12 red-robed guards had gathered at the entrance. A rather handsome youth refused to accept this. His voice wasn't loud, but it was clearly transmitted into the hall. The 6 of them were startled, and Yin Wugo's expression changed slightly. He wanted to stop him, but it was too late. A white figure flashed and appeared in front of the youth. Under his shocked gaze, a sword pointed at him. With a bang, he flew back, blood spraying everywhere. "I don't want to hear such words a second time," said Ning Chen coldly as he looked at the youth. "You!" The youth's face turned red. He was about to explode when a blood sword appeared in front of him. "Yin Wugo, thanks department head on behalf of Kong Yu for not killing me." "Wugo, you!" Kong Yu was startled and furious. He looked at Yin Wugo. "If you don't want to die, shut up." Yin Wugo coldly swept his gaze over him. Kong Yu's body trembled. His expression changed again and again. In the end, he clenched his teeth and swallowed his words. Ning Chen nodded in satisfaction. He coldly swept his gaze over everyone present. "If you're not convinced, you can come find me at any time. But next time, I won't be so kind." The 6 people inside the hall and the 12 red-robed guards lowered their heads. No matter what they were thinking, they temporarily restrained their sharpness. Ning Chen turned and walked towards the main seat. He wasn't stupid enough to think that everyone present had already changed their minds. They were all people who had lived for so long. Loyalty was nothing to them. Only life, death, and profit were the most important. In Wugo, stay behind. The rest of you, leave. Yes. Together with Kong Yu, the 12 red-clothed blood guards bowed and left. Yen Zishu, give me all the records of Ing City's city lord. I want to know what you should do. Ning Chen's eyes narrowed as he stared at the scholar below. Hearing the warning in the former's words, Yen Zishu felt a chill run down his spine, and cold sweat unconsciously flowed down his back. This subordinate obeys, Yen Zishu bowed and replied. He then stood up and clapped his hands 3 times, and a blue-clothed attendant slowly walked into the hall. Bring me the golden book on the 9th floor of the 4th row on the left of the Hidden Secrets Pavilion. Yes. Yen Zishu, who else touched this golden book before this? Ning Chen asked. Yen Zishu hesitated for a moment before saying, reporting to the department head, Duke Shiyu personally came 3 days ago. Duke Shiyu. Ning Chen's eyes flashed. It was actually him. Although it was unexpected, it was within reason. Among the people he feared the most in Grand Xia, Duke Shiyu was definitely one of them. As the head of the Grand Xia's eunuchs, his status was even higher than that of a martial Marquis. Furthermore, the martial prowess of each of the 3 dukes was unfathomable, and Duke Shiyu was no exception. For the past 2 days, he had been unable to figure out why Zhang Sun had appointed him as the head of the Hidden Secrets Pavilion. Now, it seemed that Zhang Sun had begun to suspect whether the 3 dukes were still as loyal to Grand Xia as before. The human heart is truly unpredictable. Ning Chen's heart trembled. The struggle between the 2 princes was already chaotic enough. If the 3 dukes were still not content, Grand Xia would be in deep trouble. The Golden Book recorded all the information of Ing City's city lord. Other than managing the world's prisons, the Hidden Secrets Pavilion was also responsible for investigating the actions of the nobles. In the words of the future, it was a secret service. Now that he had achieved his goal, Ning Chen did not stay any longer. He glanced at the red-clothed man beside him and said, In Wugo, come with me to the Divine Wind Camp to pay a visit to our 3rd prince. Yes. Ning Chen left the Hidden Secrets Pavilion, followed by In Wugo. Only Yen Zishu, Zhao Ji, and the others were left standing in the pavilion, staring at each other. For a moment, they were unable to react. This new head of the Hidden Secrets Pavilion had come suddenly and left even more suddenly. His actions and mentality were unfathomable. It seemed that working under him in the future would not be easy. The 2 of them headed east. Their clothes were as white as snow, and their clothes were as red as blood. One in front of the other, they silently advanced. The 2 of them, who were so close to each other, had different thoughts and different experiences, resulting in completely different lives. Who could say what they had to endure and bear? In Wugo, do you know why I chose you? Because the Hidden Secrets Pavilion Master needs a dog that can bite people. Ha! Ning Chen laughed. He did not explain, nor did he deny it. However, what he needed was not a dog, but a sharp sword. As long as I am here, your past will become the past. I will give you a completely different life, a life where you can make your own decisions. Ning Chen did not stop. His back was to In Wugo. He seemed casual, but also incomparably serious. The Hidden Secrets Pavilion's 6 colored guards were all experts who had been cleansed from a young age and then raised through special methods. They had no status, no light, and had to live their entire lives in blood. He had also entered the palace, so he could see more clearly than anyone else that the Hidden Secrets Pavilion only needed a hope. In Wugo paused, and a moment of confusion appeared in his eyes. Was it really possible to change this kind of life? In Wugo looks forward to the Hidden Secrets Pavilion Master's promise, said In Wugo indifferently. He would not easily believe the promises of others, but he would patiently watch. Perhaps he really did have a sliver of hope that this young hidden secrets pavilion master would promise a change. In the Imperial Army's camp, banners fluttered in the wind and war drums rang out. The two armies clashed. More than 2,000 people fought ruthlessly. It was as if they were on the battlefield, fighting while bathed in blood. Xia Yanwu and the other side's generals clashed. Qi waves soared into the sky, and wherever they passed, soldiers were sent flying. They were unable to block their divine might. Ning Chen and Yin Wugo calmly watched the battle in front of them, not saying a word. They were serious and focused. A waterfall of blood bloomed in front of them. It was the most beautiful scene in the world. Even saber and sword were unable to stop the blood from flowing out. 30% of the 2,000 people had already fallen. The battle between the two generals had reached its climax. Xia Yanwu really is worthy of being a once-in-a-century martial genius. Ning Chen thought to himself. The 1,000 people behind the third prince were clearly new soldiers. However, by relying on Xia Yanwu's personal strength, he was able to make up for that difference. He was even able to faintly suppress them. "Who is your opponent?" asked Ning Chen. "The Divine Wind Battalion's commander, Ming Chuan," replied Yin Wugo. Ning Chen nodded. He knew this person. He had once been one of Marquis Ji's most trusted generals. He had experienced hundreds of battles and possessed extraordinary strength. It's about to end. Seeing Xia Yanwu gradually suppress Ming Chuan, Ning Chen narrowed his eyes. Bang! In the next instant, Ming Chuan was sent flying. He had been careless and had been defeated. None of the remaining soldiers were able to resist Xia Yanwu's martial strength. They were quickly defeated. Congratulations to Third Prince on your first victory. After the crowd dispersed, Ning Chen looked at Xia Yanwu, who was gradually walking over, and said with a smile. "Jiming Marquis, please forgive me for not going out to greet you." Xia Yanwu laughed warmly. "Third Prince is too courteous." Ning Chen also smiled brilliantly. Hypocrites. The two of them looked at each other, the same word flashing through their minds. However, neither of them revealed it. Their brilliant smiles were truly disgusting. Yin Wugo calmly stood to the side, his lips curling into a cold smile. As expected, one was more shameless than the other. Ning Chen and Xia Yanwu laughed heartily as if they were old friends who had known each other for many years. They were equally hypocritical and equally shameless. Only in this shitty world could there be such a perverted, mutual appreciation. "Jiming Marquis, what do you think of my 1,000 new soldiers?" Xia Yanwu pointed at the soldiers behind him. "Not bad, courageous and courageous. They're not afraid in the face of change. Good seedlings." Ning Chen was not in a rush. He cooperated with Xia Yanwu, as if he was also interested in these things. "As expected of my Grand Xia's martial Marquis. Your eyesight is truly extraordinary." Xia Yanwu's skin was not thin. He accepted all of Ning Chen's praise, causing the soldiers passing by to feel embarrassed and quietly walk away. "I've heard that Third Prince is different from others. Seeing you today, I truly admire you." Ning Chen smiled. As for whether his words were praise or sarcasm, it was hard to guess. "You're too polite," Xia Yanwu modestly replied. Seeing this, Yin Wugo sighed inside. He was used to the schemes of the Grand Court. Only after seeing the two of them today did he understand what it meant to hide a knife behind a smile. This level of hypocrisy was truly not something a normal person could compare to. "Jiming Marquis, it's rare for you to come. Why don't you go take a look at the martial arts field?" Xia Yanwu warmly suggested. It would be impolite for Ning Chen to refuse Third Prince's kindness. Ning Chen gladly agreed, the smile on his face growing wider. The three of them continued on their journey. Xia Yanwu and Ning Chen chatted happily, and soon became brothers. Even though there was Yin Wugo, a taciturn person who wouldn't say a word even if he died, their journey was definitely not dull at all. Brother Ning's subordinate is very special. Xia Yanwu glanced at Yin Wugo behind Ning Chen, his words containing a hidden meaning. Ha, Brother Yanwu overpraises him. He's just an ordinary guard. Ning Chen smiled. Yin Wugo's expression did not change at all. It was as if the two of them were not talking about him. However, under his red robes, the hand holding his sword seemed to have begun to change. He was still unable to understand how the two sides of him could be so different. This young department head had truly allowed him to see a completely different world. Even if this world did not seem much better than the hell he had originally lived in. Ha! The martial arts field was bustling with noise and shouts that shook the heavens. On the inkstone martial arts field, two figures crossed each other. The light from the spear and halberd was so dazzling that people could not open their eyes. By the time the three of them arrived, the battle had already come to an end. Within the golden light, the halberd swept out, the spear was sent flying, and the person was defeated. Chapter 134. A moment of silence was followed by a burst of cheers. Especially the young man's side, their faces were red with excitement. They shouted as if they were the ones in the limelight just now. The young man with a halberd smiled shyly. His face still had a trace of immaturity. However, no one would look down on this young man. Apart from a few big shots in the royal army, no one else could suppress him in terms of strength. Not bad, reward him. Xia Yanwu was in a good mood and waved his hand. Third Prince. Third Prince. Only now did the crowd notice the two of them. They all bowed respectfully. Xia Yanwu was in a good mood. He had never felt so proud before. Especially after being a hypocrite with Ning Chen for so long, even he himself felt disgusted. Thank you, Third Prince. On the stage, the young man with a halberd bowed respectfully. A trace of shyness flashed across his immature face. The crowd below the stage laughed. Huh. Our Yanyan is still so shy. However, he is so strong at such a young age. Comparisons are odious. The soldiers in the barracks were very straightforward, whether they were kind, teasing, or just bored. At this moment, the laughter below the stage made the young man even more shy. His face was as red as an apple. Yanyan, well done. Thank you, Third Prince. It is all thanks to Third Prince's guidance. Huh. Xia Yanwu laughed. Ning Chen and Yin Wugo's eyes met intentionally and then looked away. However, they clearly saw the ridicule in each other's eyes. Shameless. Brother Ning, since you are here, why don't you go up on the stage and teach my disappointing subordinates a lesson? Xia Yanwu laughed heartily and said loudly, as if he was afraid that the people present couldn't hear him. Go to hell. Ning Chen cursed in his heart. However, he still had a polite smile on his face. He replied, Wugo, go and fight with the little brother on the stage. Remember, don't go too far. As for him, of course, he couldn't go up. Xia Yanwu had dug such an obvious trap. He didn't want to jump into it. As the Jiming Marquis, the head of the Department of Justice, fighting with a small soldier, if he won, it would be an unfair victory. As for losing, he didn't think about that possibility. Yes, head. Yin Wugo bowed in response. Soon after, a red light flashed, and before anyone could react, he was already on the stage. Master! The halberd-wielding youth and everyone else below the stage felt a chill run down their spines. Yan Yun, the young man with the halberd, said calmly. Yin Wugo. In the next moment, both of them held their breaths. The sword and the halberd faced each other from a distance. A moment later, only a flash of red could be seen. It was so fast that it made people's hearts tremble. With a bang, the battle began. Sword and halberd clashed. Was it fast, or was it fast? It was so fast that one couldn't see it clearly, so fast that one would die in an instant. Neither of them held back. Sword light, halberd light, crisscrossed, no one knew whose life would be spilled in the next moment. Below, Xia Yanwu's expression became more and more serious. Although he knew that the 13 red-clothed blood guards of the Supreme Court were extraordinary, especially the leader, Yin Wugo, who had never been defeated, as a prince, because he stood too high, he always unconsciously overlooked too many things. Swish! The blood sword was stained with blood, and the red clothes were also stained with blood. The sword and halberd clashed, and the two people's bodies were dyed red at the same time. Not bad. Both of their eyes narrowed. When they moved again, the halberd light was like a tide. Their blood chi surged, and their cultivation techniques were pushed to the peak. One move, and the world shook. Everyone below was dumbfounded. They all knew that Yan Yun was strong, but no one had expected him to be this strong. However, who was this red-clothed man that could force Yan Yun to this extent? Even after such a long battle, he still wasn't at a disadvantage. Brother Ning, this time you've obtained an incredible subordinate. Xia Yanwu sighed. His tone was filled with envy. Brother Yanwu is too polite. You're not bad either. Ning Chen replied courteously. What he said was the truth. This youth called Yan Yun truly did have the qualifications to compete with Yin Wugo. Ha! On the stage, the battle had been going on for a long time, but victory was still hard to determine. The halberd was strong, and the sword was sharp. One was incomparably domineering, while the other was shockingly fast. Their completely different characteristics made the result of this battle difficult to predict. It's about to end. Suddenly, Ning Chen and Xia Yanwu narrowed their eyes. The auras of the two people on the stage rapidly rose. Bloodlight soared into the sky, stirring up heaven and earth. Blinding golden light filled the air. You're the second opponent I've taken seriously. Be careful, said Yin Wugo calmly. Killing intent soared in his heart. His previous indifferent attitude had vanished. An opponent worthy of a battle caused his heart to boil once more. Bloodlight soared. The red mold between Yin Wugo's eyebrows was so beautiful that it looked like it was dripping blood. Yin Wugo raised his sword, and in an instant, the martial platform was dyed red. Terrifying killing intent filled the air, and it affected the boundless smell of blood, turning the surroundings into a bloody hell that would never see the light of day. Xia Yanwu's expression changed. Ning Chen's heart shivered. This was bad. In the face of such killing intent, Yan Yun no longer had the slightest possibility of holding back. His gaze turned cold and his halberd rapidly revolved. Swallow flashes, 100 phoenixes returned to the nest. He and his halberd transformed into rays of light that disappeared. Rays of golden light appeared one after another. Golden swallows fluttered in the air. It was like a swallow flashing, but it was even more like 100 phoenixes returning to the nest. The two of them didn't hold back in the slightest. Terrifying fluctuations instantly caused the entire martial stage to crack. Sword and halberd slashed through the air. One move would determine victory and defeat. Perhaps life and death would also be decided. However, at this moment, Ning Chen moved. He took a step forward and instantly entered the battlefield. Cold snow began to fall from the sky. Silver frost sprinkled down as the life scroll was circulated to its peak. Snow condensed between heaven and earth. His left and right hands pointed forward at the same time. With a clang, he blocked the halberd's advance. Boom! In the next moment, the shockwaves erupted. An unparalleled might caused the entire martial stage to collapse. Boulders flew everywhere, smashing dozens of meters away. The surrounding soldiers quickly retreated. However, there were still some who didn't have time to dodge. Xia Yanwu also moved. He shot out dozens of meters and blocked the falling boulders with his palm, protecting the soldiers behind him. The competition ends here, said Ning Chen indifferently. He shook his hands and pushed aside the halberd. Yes. Yin Wugo calmly accepted the order. He sheathed his sword and the red light faded. Yan Yun also cupped his fists and bowed before retreating to the side. Brother Ning, why don't you come back to the camp with me and have a cup of tea to quench your thirst? Xia Yanwu walked over as if nothing had happened. It would be impolite to refuse. Ning Chen nodded. The two of them walked in front with Yin Wugo following. Before leaving, he glanced at Yan Yun. A trace of interest flashed through his cold eyes. The three of them quickly arrived in front of the camp. Ning Chen and Xia Yanwu walked in while Yin Wugo was left outside. He can come in, said Xia Yanwu. Ning Chen softly laughed. This is the commander's tent after all. He has a sword on him, so it's inconvenient for him to come in. Brother Ning is too polite. These rules are only used to guard against outsiders. Brother Ning doesn't need to be so reserved, said Xia Yanwu. Thank you, Brother Yanwu. But the rules still have to be followed, smiled Ning Chen. Xia Yanwu didn't say anything more. This knowledge destiny Marquis really was an extremely difficult person to deal with. He didn't seem to care about trifles, but in reality he handled things flawlessly. Brother Ning, please. Xia Yanwu poured a cup of tea and pushed it in front of Ning Chen. Ning Chen received the tea and took a sip. He immediately praised, good tea. The tea wasn't bad, but that was it. It wasn't that he was picky. It was just that he had once drunk the tea personally brewed by Fan Lingyue. Since then, no matter what tea he drank, he would always feel that the taste was ordinary. Brother Ning is too kind, said Xia Yanwu politely. Outside the commander's tent, squads of the Divine Wind Battalion patrolled. Their armor was dense, and under the setting sun, they emitted a biting cold. The Divine Wind Battalion was the most elite battalion of the Imperial City's 11 battalions aside from the Dragon Guard Battalion. Their combat strength was outstanding, and they held an extremely important position in the Imperial City's 330,000 Imperial Guards. Yin Wugo calmly stood outside the tent. His red robes fluttered in the wind, and the red mole between his eyebrows was as beautiful as blood. It gave people an indescribable feeling of disharmony. The two people in the tent chatted for a long time. Only when the sun was about to completely set did Ning Chen walk out. Let's go. Ning Chen glanced at the red-robed figure next to the tent. Yin Wugo followed. His footsteps were heavy as he faced the final setting sun and headed west. Yin Wugo, you did well in today's competition, said Ning Chen calmly. He didn't want to waste his breath. The reason he had brought Yin Wugo out was to find a sword. This was Yin Wugo's character, and he didn't need to suppress it. Thank you, department head, said Yin Wugo. Ning Chen didn't say anything more. He had already expressed his attitude. Today, he had acted to stop Yin Wugo, but that didn't mean he would reject Yin Wugo's actions. Yan Yun would definitely be heavily injured in that final move. He had only acted to give Xia Yanwu some face. Xia Yanwu was a smart person. He had always acted straightforward and carefree in front of others, but that was just using his brave appearance to hide his scheming heart. None of the princes of the Grand Xia were simple. After returning to the imperial court, Yin Wugo returned to the Western Palace. Ning Chen stood in front of the Hidden Secrets Pavilion for a moment, but in the end, he didn't enter. He turned and left. Right now, the situation in the imperial city was too chaotic. He couldn't be distracted. Her matters could only be discussed later. When night fell, Ning Chen didn't return to his residence. Instead, he walked towards Prince Yan's residence. Since he had returned, he hadn't had the chance to thank his senior. Logically speaking, he should go personally. In Prince Yan's residence, the green and red swords flew through the air and stabbed into the ground. Prince Yan stood in front, waiting for someone to come. Soon, Ning Chen walked in and bowed respectfully. Senior. Yes. Prince Yan nodded and waved his hand. The green sword flew out and landed in front of Ning Chen, giving off boundless coldness. Let me see how much you've improved. Ning Chen pulled out the green sword and focused. This was his first time fighting with his senior. He also wanted to see how big the gap was between him and the strongest people in the world. In the battle with the abbot of Du-E Temple, he had set up too many tricks. He had only defeated the Buddha in the mortal world after many calculations. However, this didn't mean anything. If they fought again, he didn't doubt that the loser would be him and Qing Ning. At the end of his thoughts, Ning Chen moved. Frost condensed into a sword and snowflakes surged. A silver shadow streaked across the air. Bang! Prince Yen flipped his hand. The red sword flew across the sky and blocked the green sword. With a bang, the aftershock spread out quickly. Their clothes fluttered in the wind. Chapter 135. Green and red collided. Cold and heat collided. The frost melted quickly, turning into mist and dispersing. Prince Yen retracted his perception of the green sword's aura. He also suppressed his cultivation to the middle stage of the 9th rank to give the junior the greatest fairness. Ning Chen already felt unparalleled pressure from the sword. His opponent had no openings at all. He didn't even know where to attack next. Ning Chen didn't have the upper hand. He activated the 2 scrolls of the heavenly books at the same time. The scroll of earth activated, causing the chi of thick earth to explode. Between the two, a dark yellow light rose. The gravity instantly increased by more than 10 times. Prince Yan's body sank, but his expression was still calm. The red sword surged with heat and slashed down with the help of gravity. It was faster and heavier. The green sword in Ning Chen's hand was instantly suppressed, leaving an opening in front of his chest. Prince Yen reached out his left hand and pierced 3 inches above his heart. He held back but didn't show any mercy. He broke through the advantage of the 2 scrolls of the heavenly books and suppressed Ning Chen again. At the critical moment, Ning Chen took half a step back. He flipped his left palm, causing waves to surge. He also attacked Prince Yan's chest. Not bad. Prince Yen nodded and dodged to the side. His sword finger swept out and a green sword light shot out. Ning Chen dodged, but with a bang, the ground shook where he was just now. In the blink of an eye, a 3-foot-long sword mark appeared. It was bottomless. Waves of the East. Seeing that his opponent was unshakable, Ning Chen raised his left palm. The blue light shone brightly and the waves rolled. The boundless sea crashed down. First defense, waves break 10,000 miles. After the palm, Ning Chen immediately changed his move. His sword split the sky and slashed down in the waves. Facing the palm power and the sword ray, Prince Yen clenched his left hand. The cold air condensed and an ice sword instantly formed. Green and red breath together, absolute chi. Prince Yan's 2 swords were as fast as lightning. The green and red swords danced and shone brightly. The moment they shone, countless sword rays flashed past. The 3 moves collided, and a huge explosion erupted. The earth trembled, and numerous cracks appeared, extending for 10 zhang in all directions. Ning Chen's eyes narrowed. His body moved again. One sword split into thousands. In an instant, it condensed into one and reached Qingyi. However, this extremely fast sword was blocked by the even faster red sword. The 2 swords collided, and the aftershock spread out, filling the air with dust and sand. Ning Chen's pupils shrank fiercely. Before he could react, an ice sword had already reached his chest. You've lost. King Yan's hand shook, and the ice sword scattered. He said calmly. Ning Chen was slightly disappointed. He knew that he would lose, but he didn't expect that he would lose so quickly. He had 2 scrolls of the arcane tomes and the cultivation method of the Zhongsun lineage, but he still couldn't gain the upper hand in the face of the senior. If he had switched places with Yan Qinhuang for the last move, he would not have been able to do it as exquisitely as his predecessor. The true intent of the sword was fast, ruthless, and accurate. Of these 3 aspects, the most difficult was accuracy. The slightest difference could lead to a difference of 1,000 miles. Prince Yen waved his hand, and the green and red swords turned into flowing light and disappeared into the sword rack. Do you know why you lost? Prince Yen asked calmly. Your foundation is not solid, Ning Chen said emotionally. Prince Yen nodded and continued, your martial arts progress is too fast, and you have neglected the most basic things. The path of martial arts is not only about ultimate moves. In battle, there are not so many opportunities for you to gather chi and condense moves. The most basic moves are the key to victory. Thank you for your guidance, senior. Ning Chen bowed respectfully and thanked him. His moves were all learned in battle. They were useful, but they were too utilitarian and not solid enough. He didn't pay much attention before, but after today's battle, he realized how big the gap was between him and the strongest person in the world. These days, you have been distracted too much. This will be detrimental to your path of martial arts. The most important thing in martial arts cultivation is to be distracted, especially at the crucial moment of rank 9. You have to be careful, Prince Yen warned. I understand. Ning Chen sighed in his heart. He couldn't leave Zhang Sun alone. As for martial arts cultivation, he would take care of it if he could. If he couldn't, he could only give up temporarily. Prince Yen frowned. He could see that Ning Chen didn't listen. In a month, I will leave the imperial city. I will give you a month to settle these matters in the imperial city. After a month, you will leave with me, Prince Yen said. Although his words were calm, there was no room for objection. Ning Chen was stunned. Just as he was about to speak, Prince Yen stopped him. Don't forget that you are still my sword attendant. In this year, your freedom is up to me. Yes. Ning Chen agreed helplessly. He knew that his senior was doing it for his own good. However, a month was too tight. On the way back, the wind blew gently. Ning Chen walked on the street with a heavy heart. The more he cared, the more he felt that he didn't have enough energy. The situation in the imperial city was not optimistic. The existence of the two princes was like two time bombs that could explode at any time. Apart from that, he even suspected that the three dukes had played a dishonorable role in the background. The loyalty of the three dukes to the Xia kingdom was unquestionable. However, at this time, power was at its most turbulent period. It was inevitable that ambitious people would appear. Unknowingly, Ning Chen passed by the Yi River. Under the night sky, the brothel was at its busiest time of the day. People entered and exited. No matter what era it was, the matters between men and women were irresistible temptations. In front of the Lingyan pavilion, 4 or 5 women with exquisite figures were welcoming guests. Their clothes were so thin that one could see the bottom of their clothes. A large part of their snow-white skin was exposed. The rest of their skin was faintly discernible. Just one look was enough to make one's mouth dry. Young master, please come in. Ning Chen had just arrived in front of the pavilion when he was pulled by a beautiful and scantily dressed lady. Following that, a gorgeously dressed lady with a slim waist and a fat butt came over to help. She smelled good and smiled coquettishly. Her full breasts were almost pressing on Ning Chen's body, forcefully pushing him in. The pavilion was extremely spacious, but there were already many guests. Most of the tables were already occupied. The lady accompanied him on both sides. Her clothes were half undone. She looked a little drunk and seductive. Her decadent aura made people restless. Ning Chen glanced around the hall without leaving a trace. He acted like an ordinary person, a little shy and a little curious. In front of these pitiful ladies, he would not disturb them if he could. Young master, this is your first time here. How about big sister accompany you? As soon as they entered the pavilion, the young lady used all her skills and half-hugged Ning Chen. Her body pressed against Ning Chen's body. Her originally thin clothes were almost no different from being naked at this moment. The fragrance of her body rushed into Ning Chen's nose without reservation, causing Ning Chen, who was still very calm before, to blush. "Ah, little brother, you're shy. I like you so much." Yen Shui knew that she had met a virgin at first glance. Her eyes sparkled and her heart was filled with joy. The young man in front of her was handsome and had a clean aura. Although she had been in this business for a long time and had seen all kinds of people, she still wanted to be with someone she was comfortable with. "I'm here to look for someone," Ningchen said shyly. "Haha, little brother, don't be shy. Who doesn't come here to look for someone? Don't tell me you're here to eat." At a table not far away, a middle-aged man in luxurious clothes who was surrounded by several ladies laughed. "I'm really here to look for someone," Ningchen explained in a low voice. "Yes, you're looking for someone. If little brother doesn't mind, sister will accompany you." Yen Shui snickered. She did not expose him and went along with Ningchen. It was not easy to find someone she liked. She could not scare him away. Ningchen smiled. He found a place nearby and ordered some dishes. However, he did not touch them. He just drank tea quietly. He did not speak or do anything. He looked simple and normal. Yen Shui was happy. She thought that Ningchen was shy and was trying to pretend to be calm. She stayed by his side and rubbed her plump chest against him from time to time. Every time she got up to pour tea, her slender waist would bend slightly. Her entire chest was exposed. The fragrance would come and tug at his heartstrings. Every time at this time, Ningchen's face would blush. His handsome face would look even more shy. Yen Shui giggled. Her intention to tease the little guy in front of her was even stronger. "Sister, what are the things upstairs for?" Ningchen raised his head curiously and asked with a little shyness on his face. Yen Shui rolled her eyes and said seductively, "Haha, there are fun places upstairs. Little brother, do you want to accompany sister upstairs to have a look?" Ningchen lowered his head slightly and did not speak. His face instantly turned red. Ding! At this moment, the pleasant sound of zither rang in the attic. The sound of zither was faint and dreamy. In the blink of an eye, it dispelled the decadent sound in the attic. The entire attic was abnormally quiet in an instant. Only the celestial sound echoed for a long time. Fairy Su's zither. The middle-aged man who teased Ningchen before reacted and shouted with a love-struck and joyful face. "I've heard that Fairy Fian is good at both zither and dancing. My young master is here to visit today. I wonder if he can meet you." At the same time, on the second floor, the doors of several rooms opened. A few figures in luxurious clothes walked out. One of the attendants saw the master's eyes and asked. His tone was polite and calm without a trace of neglect. In the room covered by the bead curtain, a clear voice came out. It was like the tinkling of clear water. She declined politely. "Miss has not been feeling well recently. She can't meet guests. Please forgive her, young master." "Oh? Then I wonder what illness Fairy Su is suffering from. My young master may be able to help." The attendant who spoke earlier chuckled and spoke again. Although his words were still polite, there was a trace of aggressiveness. As soon as the words fell, the scene was silent for a while. Everyone could hear that the attendant's words were somewhat forceful. Fairy Su had been ill for a long time and rarely showed up. This was already a well-known fact. However, the Lingyan Pavilion's background was unfathomable. Few people dared to offend it. But they did not expect such a scene to appear today. Ningchen raised his head and looked at a room on the second floor. He drank tea while quietly watching this farce. He had no intention of intervening. He had heard of the name Su Fian. She was a 3-time courtesan. Her beauty spread far and wide. Moreover, she was well versed in poetry and books. She was also a rare talent in the world. Chapter 136. It is the young noble of the Nangong family, Nangong Qing. Fairy Su is in trouble now. Someone recognized the young man dressed in luxurious green robes beside the attendant. The Nangong family, a family with 2 marquises, was like the sun in the sky, and was one of the top nobles in the imperial dynasty. Their might was close to that of a martial marquis, and even one of the 11 camps of the imperial army was in the hands of a marquis from the Nangong family. It is rumored that young noble Qing has never asked for love. Why did he suddenly come here today? On the 2nd floor, in front of a room opposite to Nangong Qing, a handsome and frivolous young man laughed. His tone was frivolous, but he did not care about Nangong Qing's identity. The son of Tai Shigong, Gu. Seeing the person who spoke, everyone in Yichue Pavilion had weird looks on their faces. As the head of the Confucian sect, the most knowledgeable person in the world, for the imperial tutor to have such a son who was always in love with brothels and did not do proper work, anyone would find it weird. Gu was one of the 3 hedonistic sons of the imperial city. The other 2 were Marquis Tai Ping's son, Chang Sun Yunxian, and the other was the oldest Marquis of Desia, the eldest grandson of Marquis Shao Xian. Nangong Qing closed his fan, his slender eyes squinted, and said indifferently, "So it is the only son of Tai Shigong. Why, do I, Nangong Qing, need to report to you?" Although Gu was angry, she still replied with a smile, "Of course not. It's just that Su Xianzi is not feeling well and doesn't want to see guests. Why don't you force her? Why don't I treat you to a few drinks?" "No need, I, Nangong Qing, cannot afford to lose face like this." Nangong Qing glanced at the former coldly and said in disdain. He did not want to speak anymore, as though saying another word would be an insult to himself. Gu's chest froze, his handsome face became extremely ugly, and he was speechless. Ning Chen had already shifted his gaze over. After observing for a long time, he could not help but sigh in his heart. A tiger father is a dog's son. This Gu is too lacking in scheming and shrewdness. The few sons of the nobles were at each other's throats, causing the atmosphere to become even heavier. Beside Ning Chen, Yan Chui's face was slightly pale. The frivolous and bold lady from before had disappeared, and her hand subconsciously grabbed onto Ning Chen's clothes. "I'm fine." Patting Yan Chui's hand, Ning Chen smiled. Seeing Yan Chui's heart, Yan Chui's face, Yan Chui's, she blushing, her body slightly moving, she moved her body slightly, as she felt, her face, Yan Chui's. At this moment, behind the beaded curtain, the sound of a zither was heard. It was peaceful and pleasing to the ear. Gu's state of mind gradually calmed down, and her pale face gradually became rosier. "Young Master Ji, many thanks for your protective feelings. Fei Yan is here to thank you." The bead curtain made a light sound, and a voice that was like the sound of nature came out from behind the curtain. The beads on the jade plate fell, attracting everyone's attention in an instant. Gu's expression froze for a moment, and then she was pleasantly surprised. She replied nervously, "You're too kind, Fairy Su. This is my duty." Behind the bead curtain, the lady's voice came out again, this time with a tinge of coldness. "Young Master Nangong, Yu Fei Yan's illness is special, and ordinary medicines are useless, so there is no need for young master to worry." And yesterday, the 10th young master had brought the imperial physician over, and said that there is only one type of flower that can cure Yu Fei Yan's illness, and other than that, there is no other way. 10th young master. Hearing that name, Nangong Qing and the few noble young masters on the 2nd floor all frowned. "I wonder what flower Fairy Su needs. Gu may be able to help." Hearing that Yu Fei Yan was truly ill, Gu became nervous and asked anxiously. "Incurable?" Ning Chen was startled, then shook his head helplessly. Nangong Qing was also startled, but then his mouth curled up, and a trace of ridicule flashed past his cold face. "Brother Ji is right. I wonder what flower Fairy Su is looking for. Nangong Qing is willing to help." Nangong Qing asked. Behind the bead curtain, there was a moment of silence, and then a faint sigh came out. "Since the 2 young masters have spoken, Yu Fei Yan will not hide it anymore. The flower Fei Yan needs is called the Mansha flower. It is hard to find in the world, so I am not willing to tell you." "Paramitha flower." Ning Chen's eyes constricted as he muttered, "It was the legendary undying flower. it could not be born in the human world, and only grew on the other side of the Yellow Springs. Ha! This young master seems to know the origin of this flower, truly admirable. Ning Chen's momentary loss of composure attracted the attention of the person behind the bead curtain. A gentle voice came out, and in a moment, everyone's eyes were on Ning Chen. Suppressing the ripples in his heart, Ning Chen's expression quickly returned to normal, and he laughed indifferently. I was just lucky to have heard of it. Fairy Su is too kind. Young master is knowledgeable, truly admirable. I wonder if young master can come over. Yu Fei Yen would like to ask young master more questions regarding the mancha flower. It is my honor. Ning Chen laughed indifferently, and replied politely. Yen Chui unknowingly let go of Ning Chen's hands. Fear flashed past her eyes. The man in front of her, was he still the young man she bullied? I'm sorry, I am really here to look for someone. Seeing the change in Yen Chui's eyes, Ning Chen turned his head and laughed lightly. His voice was very soft, only the two of them could hear it, and to the others, it was just the intimacy between a man and a woman. Hearing that, Yen Chui's body trembled. She raised her head and looked into Ning Chen's eyes. Only then did she understand that the man beside her was only trying to make her happy. The smile in his eyes was as calm as ever, never changing. Under Yen Chui's gaze, Ning Chen stood up and walked up the stairs step by step. Humph! On the second floor, Nan Gongqing waved his sleeves, and walked back to his room with a cold face. Today's goal had failed. The background of this Ling Yan pavilion was more troublesome than he thought. But the arrival of Ji Ming Marquis was truly unexpected. Entering the beaded curtains, in the elegant room, a beautiful figure sat quietly in front of a guqin. Her black hair was like a waterfall, her skin was like jade, her beautiful eyes were filled with hope, her peerless appearance had a bewitching charm. Every frown and smile revealed an indescribable charm, like a fully bloomed peony, causing people to be unable to shift their eyes away. Seeing that Ning Chen had arrived, Su Fei Yen personally stood up to pour wine, her long hair hanging down, covering half of her beautiful face. She was attentive and meticulous, as though she was welcoming a friend that she had known for a long time. Young Master Ning, Yen Chui likes you. I hope young master can treat Yen Chui well, and do not hurt a good girl's heart. Without raising her head, Su Fei Yen chuckled, not distant, not pretentious, as though she was just chatting with a friend. Ning Chen laughed, but did not reply. Regardless of what he said, it would be wrong, so he might as well not reply. Men are all so fickle, acting whenever they see a situation. Su Fei Yen raised her head and said softly, her beautiful face flashed with a trace of grief. Miss Su, your words are a little too much. Ning Chen said indifferently. Su Fei Yen raised her wine cup, an apologetic expression on her face. Young Master Ning, please don't take offense. It was Fei Yen who lost control of herself. Miss Su is too courteous, but matters of the heart are just too distant for me. Ning Chen took the wine cup and drained it in one gulp. Su Fei Yen gently smiled, changing the topic. The 10th prince knew that young master would be coming to visit in a few days, so he specially sent a gift ahead of time. I hope young master can kindly accept it. Half a purple pill appeared in Su Fei Yan's hand. A rich medicinal fragrance wafted out, refreshing the mind. Just by smelling it, one would feel much more relaxed. Ning Chen narrowed his eyes, his aura constantly surging. Even the two heavenly tomes began to tremble. Su Fei Yen looked at the half pill in her hand and continued, this pill is called Extreme Breath. It is said that it has the ability to bring the dead back to life. Unfortunately, there is only half of it left, and the medicinal effect is about to dissipate. However, it should be of help to young Master Ning's injuries. The 10th prince is considerate, but I do not understand why the 10th prince is so confident that I will definitely come here. Ning Chen did not refuse. Taking the pill, he looked at the woman in front of him and asked. Then why did you come? Su Fian asked with a sweet smile. I have come to find you, honey. However, it seems that the current manager of the Lingyan Pavilion has already changed, Ning Chen honestly said. Hani still has other matters to attend to, so I will temporarily take care of this place, Su Fei Yen smiled. Then, Mrs. Identity has really made me curious, Ning Chen indifferently said. Su Fei Yan's lips curled, but she did not reply. Instead, she stood up and poured another cup of wine. Softly, she said, Fei Yan is only a prostitute. I cannot enter the Marquis' eyes. Ha! Ning Chen did not ask any more questions. Drinking the wine in his cup, his thoughts quickly turned. Ever since he had entered the Lingyan pavilion, he had noticed that something was wrong. Not only were the women in the pavilion unfamiliar, even some of the previous decorations had changed. He had stayed in the Lingyan pavilion for a period of time, so he was very sensitive to these changes. It seemed that the Lingyan pavilion had not simply changed managers, but had already changed owners. But, he did not understand why the 10th prince would hand over such an important place to someone else. It was the most flourishing place in the imperial city. Not only did it bring in money daily, it was also the gathering place for all sorts of information. But, what made him even more concerned was Su Fei Yan's identity. He did not care about it in the past, but after meeting her today, he realized that the 3-time courtesan Belle who rarely showed her face actually had an extremely minute martial qi. Other than Fan Lingyu, it was the first time he had seen someone who could conceal their qi so well. It seemed like the fight for the throne of De Xia had attracted a few powerhouses that had been hidden for a long time. 1,000 years of De Xia, in the end, had an unparalleled attraction to all the powerhouses. Nan Gongqing's appearance was most likely to probe Su Fei Yan's true identity. On the surface, the two marquises of the Nangong family had not chosen a side and maintained their neutrality, making people unable to see through them. Young master, you mentioned the name of the Permitha flower, have you seen it before? Just then, Su Fei Yan asked softly. There were not many people in the world who knew of the red spider lily. Most of them had only heard of the story of the red spider lily, but did not know that the red spider lily was the red spider lily. No. Ning Chen shook his head. He had seen the yellow springs flower, which grew in the weak water, but he had never seen the red spider lily. What a pity. Seeing that Ning Chen was not lying, Su Fei Yan sighed, her beautiful face flashed with a faint sorrow. Chapter 137. Ning Chen pondered for a moment before asking, May I ask why Miss Su is looking for the red spider lily? To treat it. Su Fian replied. Oh? According to my observations, Miss Su does not seem to be suffering from a strange illness. Ning Chen revealed a strange expression. This flower is for the elders of my family to use. Su Fian replied honestly. Ning Chen was silent. The red spider lily only grew on the other side of the yellow springs. However, the bottomless boat beside the Ruo River had already been rowed to the other side. In other words, even if someone found the entrance to the underworld, they would not be able to cross the Ruo River. What a sin! Ning Chen's mood was not very good. In this world, there were very few existences like Ghost Girl. Now that he thought about it, he could borrow the Scroll of Earth's guidance to enter the underworld from that time. But he did not know if the red spider lily truly existed. Last time, he had only seen the yellow springs flower and not the red spider lily. If he had time, perhaps he could go back and look for it. Miss Su, I am unable to help you with this matter. Ning Chen sighed regretfully. Su Fian laughed softly. Young Master Ning is currently in control of the imperial court and knows all the news in the world like the back of your hand. Could young Master Ning help pay attention to this matter? Definitely. Ning Chen replied straightforwardly. Then I will thank young master. Su Fian bowed gracefully. You're welcome. Ning Chen thickened his face and accepted this bow. As for the red spider lily, it would depend on whether Su Fian was a friend or foe. Right now, he still could not see through this woman's background and was not in the mood to help. Miss Su, it is already late. I must take my leave. Please help me thank the 10th prince for his good intentions. Just say that Ning Chen will personally pay a visit in a few days. Seeing that he could not find out any more information, Ningchen did not want to stay any longer. He stood up and cupped his hands in respect. Fian will see you off. Su Fian stood up and said softly. No need. There are too many people outside. It is best if Miss Su does not show her face. Ningchen turned around and waved his hand before walking away. After Ningchen left, the smile on Su Fian's face gradually disappeared and her brows furrowed. This Jiming Marquis of the Xia dynasty was as intelligent as the legends. She had a feeling that Ningchen must know something about the red spider lily. He just didn't say anything. A few months ago, the Netherworld Palace had opened once. Unfortunately, everyone was stuck in front of the Rua Shui, and no one could pass through. Now, even the entrance to the Netherworld Palace had disappeared, and it was impossible to even enter. It seemed that she still had to find a chance to continue testing the Marquis. The red spider lily was very important to her and she could not let go of any possibility. As Ningchen exited the Lingyan pavilion, he felt someone's gaze on him. Turning his head, he saw a beautiful figure standing desolately at the entrance. Her eyes gazed into the distance with a hint of sadness, causing one's heart to ache. Ningchen sighed softly and turned around to leave. He did not stay any longer. Who said that prostitutes were heartless and actors had no loyalty? Among those words that were filled with mockery, who had ever agreed with their sadness? He had never looked down on prostitutes. He came from China, and in the 5,000 years of history, there had been too many admirable prostitutes. Behind this, it set off the coldness of men. The truly heartless ones were always men, and he was no exception. Yan Shui was a good girl. Unfortunately, they were not fated to be together. His heart would not change for anyone. No matter who he hurt, it would be the same. As the night wind blew, Ningchen threw away his emotions and his heart hardened again. Before helping Zhang Sun solve these problems, nothing else was important. After returning to the Marquis mansion, Ningchen saw that the lights were still on. He quickly walked a few steps and saw little Mingyu lying on the table full of food, waiting for him to come back and eat. Ningchen's heart flashed with a trace of guilt. He only cared about his business and forgot about little Mingyu. He said that he would go out for a while, but now the sky was completely dark. Mingyu saw the bad guy come back and a bright smile immediately appeared on her face. She jumped down from the stool and ran over to greet him. You must be hungry. I'm not back yet, so you can eat first. Ningchen's heart ached as he rubbed the little girl's cloth hat and said softly. I secretly ate a little. Mingyu shyly stretched out her hand and gestured. Ha! Ningchen chuckled and immediately held the little girl's hand to return to the house and sit down to eat. The food was all served and had obviously been reheated many times. Ningchen picked up his chopsticks and put a lot of meat into little Mingyu's bowl. He said softly, don't be picky, or you'll be sick all day like your sister Lingyu. Mingyu looked at the bowl full of meat and vegetables and her face turned bitter. She hated meat the most. Finish it quickly. I'll grill fish for you tomorrow. Seeing that the little girl did not move her chopsticks, Ningchen coaxed her. Okay, Mingyu answered obediently, and then started to eat in small bites. Ningchen ate a few mouthfuls with her. Most of the time, he watched the little girl eat. Mingyu was actually very picky with her food. Without anyone watching, it was hard to feed her. Mingyu, did your sister Lingyu say when she will teach you martial arts? Ningchen asked softly. No. Mingyu shook her head and answered. Do you want to learn? Ningchen continued to ask. No. Mingyu replied unenthusiastically. Ningchen nodded and did not try to persuade her. If she did not want to learn, then forget it. This matter could not be forced. It was normal for girls to have no interest in martial arts. Just like Ah Man. She was very talented and had a Xiantian father to guide her. However, she did not like martial arts. Her progress in martial arts had always been frighteningly slow. Since she did not want to learn, then so be it. If there was a chance, martial arts was not the only thing in this world. After a while, Mingyu finally finished eating the rice in her bowl. She was so full that she did not want to move. She had eaten too much. Are you still going out tomorrow? Mingyu asked. Why? Ningchen asked curiously. Tomorrow is my birthday. Mingyu said softly. Ningchen was startled. After a while, he reacted and said, I'm not going out tomorrow. He had originally planned to visit the 10th prince's residence. However, since it was little Mingyu's birthday, he would just let the 10th prince die. Hearing the bad guy's answer, Mingyu smiled happily. Okay, it's time to sleep. Let's make a big cake together tomorrow. Ningchen pulled the little girl up and said. What's a cake? Mingyu asked curiously. Food. You'll know tomorrow. Ningchen replied. He tried to remember how to make a cake. In his previous life, he had made it before. However, there was no oven here, so it was a bit troublesome. Mingyu was 8 years old now. He had to give her a different birthday. Mingyu would return to northern Meng and continue to be the emperor. He did not have much time left to accompany her. The next morning, Mingyu woke up at dawn. She ran to the bad guy's door and knocked hard. It's time to get up and make a cake. Ningchen woke up from his meditation and opened the door. He saw little Mingyu dressed neatly and standing there. Her little face was full of anticipation. Brush your teeth and wash your face. After that, we'll go buy ingredients. Ningchen instructed. Okay. Mingyu ran back to her room and started to prepare. The toothbrush was made from pig's hair. Ningchen made it himself. After a while, the two of them squatted in front of the door. They were brushing their teeth while spitting out pig's hair. Hey, bad guy, can this thing not shed hair? Mingyu asked with foam in her mouth. Hey, when I have time, I will ask the workshop to improve it. I'm also not good at this. Ningchen replied while spitting out the hair. Give me more when it's done. Mingyu said with a lisp. Okay. Ningchen replied. The two of them quickly finished brushing their teeth and had a simple meal. After that, they went shopping hand in hand. Making a cake was very troublesome. It required a lot of ingredients. Eggs, flour, sugar, milk, oil, salt, etc. The two of them shopped from morning until late in the morning. Only then did they manage to buy all the ingredients. Do you want to buy anything else? Mingyu asked. I also need a frying pan. Ningchen looked left and right and replied. I've never heard of it. Mingyu shook her head. She knew about pots, but this was the first time she heard of frying pan. Ningchen also had a headache. Had this thing not been invented yet? Transmigration really wasn't something that humans could do. It was always a crosstalk. Forget it, I'll go back and make one. Ningchen looked for a long time and did not see it. He gave up looking for it. No matter if there was a frying pan or not, he would make one himself. There should be such a thing in the palace, but he did not know what it was called. The two of them carried their bags back to the residence and chased out all the chefs in the kitchen. Then, they started to work. The chefs looked at each other. They did not know what their master was doing. Mingyu, go and crack some eggs. Remember to separate the yolks and whites. Ningchen instructed as he busied himself. Okay. Little Mingyu was wearing a big white work uniform. She carried 2 big porcelain bowls and ran to the side to help. Ningchen started to prepare to make a pot. There was no frying pan in the residence, but there was something very similar. It was a bit rough and the bottom was a bit round. Ningchen stared at it in a daze for a long time. What should he do? Mingyu quickly divided the eggs. Even if she messed up her hands and face, she was still better than a certain someone. Will it work? Mingyu looked at the bad guy who was still in a daze and asked doubtfully. Yes. Ning Chen immediately replied. Was this a joke? How could it not work? It had to work even if it did not work. I don't care. Ning Chen took the pot and placed a round iron plate on top of it. He stuck it on top of it and made do. He could not use the flour now, so he mixed it with the corn starch he bought. Fortunately, there were stores that sold it. Otherwise, he would die if he made it himself. Go and sift it. The finer the better. Ning Chen handed the flour to little Mingyu and said. Okay. Mingyu took the flour and asked the chef for a sieve. Then, she continued to work. Outside the kitchen, more and more servants gathered. After a few days of getting along, everyone knew that their master was actually a very peaceful person. He did not have many rules. Therefore, everyone was not reserved. At this moment, footsteps sounded outside the door. A little eunuch came and shouted, "The Empress's decree has arrived." I'm busy. If you have something to say, say it. Ning Chen was so busy that he could not find his bearings. Master, Her Majesty summons you to the palace. The little eunuch smiled apologetically. No. Ning Chen shook his head without hesitation. Go back and tell Her Majesty that I'm sick and can't go. If he went now, he would most likely be scolded again. He did not want to make himself uncomfortable. Chapter 138. The little eunuch was in a difficult position. This lie was too fake. It would be strange if Her Highness believed it. Is the flour sifting done? Ning Chen glanced at little Mingyu who was sitting far away and shouted. It's done, cough cough. Mingyu ran over with flour in her arms. Her face was pale, except for her two big eyes. Ning Chen took the flour and wiped little Mingyu's face. It didn't come out, so he didn't care and continued with his work. What are you stirring? Mingyu blinked her big eyes and asked. Egg white and sugar. Ning Chen took 3 chopsticks and stirred with all his might. Without an egg beater, he could only use brute force to solve the problem. After a while, the egg white turned into foam and couldn't be poured out. Ning Chen put it aside and began to clean up the egg yolk. The little eunuch was left to the side. No one cared, no one asked, and he was a little dazed. Ning Chen suddenly remembered that there was such a person. He looked at the little eunuch and shouted, Someone come, send little eunuch back. Remember to pay for the tea. Yes. The old steward walked out and came to the little eunuch who was speechless. He turned sideways and said, Eunuch, please. Marquis. The little eunuch came back to his senses and was about to persuade again when he was interrupted by a voice. Mingyu, don't be naughty. If the egg white is ruined, there won't be any cake to eat today. Oh. Mingyu quickly retracted her small hand and smiled embarrassedly. The little eunuch left dejectedly, thinking about how to report back with a gloomy face. In the kitchen, Ning Chen was in a hurry. In the blink of an eye, he forgot about Jiangsuan's summons. After the egg yolk and flour were mixed, there weren't many steps left. Ning Chen poured half of the egg white into the flour paste, stirred it twice, and then threw it to little Mingyu. Do as I did. Stir it up and down. When it's smooth, pour the rest in and continue stirring. Okay. Mingyu replied. She immediately took the paste and stirred it as if she knew how. Ning Chen nodded with satisfaction. This child was teachable. Little Mingyu didn't have any problems. Ning Chen walked to the pot and carefully brushed a layer of oil on the surface of the pot. Bad person, there are so many bubbles. What should I do? Mingyu shouted. Poke it. Ning Chen replied. Mingyu felt a little dizzy. There were so many of them, how long was she going to poke them? Aunt Li, give me a needle. Mingyu looked at a middle-aged woman with a pretty face at the door and waved her small hand. Okay. Aunt Li hurriedly brought over a few needles. Ning Chen cleaned up the pot and came over to help. He held a needle and poked the bubbles one by one. The two of them busied themselves for half a day and finally wiped out all the bubbles. Then, they poured the cake paste into the pot and started baking it. Bad guy? Will it work? Mingyu asked doubtfully. I should be able to, Ningchen replied, obviously lacking confidence. The two of them waited quietly in anticipation. One was the Northern Meng Emperor and the other was the martial Marquis of the Great Xia dynasty. They surrounded the stove and were so nervous that they did not dare to speak. The solemn atmosphere also spread among the people outside. They all stood at the door and waited with wide eyes. After a long time, the aroma of the cake wafted out. The unique sweet aroma quickly spread out, making everyone look forward to it even more. It's about time. Seeing that the color of the cake was gradually turning yellow, Ningchen moved the pot away and carefully cut the cake from the pot with a knife. Let me try, Mingyu shouted impatiently. Ningchen cut a piece and brought it to little Mingyu's mouth. After seeing the little girl take a bite, he also took a bite. It's delicious. Their eyes unexpectedly lit up. It was sweet and delicious, soft and glutinous. The taste was excellent. Bad guy, you're really a genius. Mingyu smiled and praised. Of course. Ningchen accepted the little girl's worship without any modesty. Mingyu cut a piece of cake and ran to the door. She handed it to Aunt Li who had brought the needles and said happily, Aunt Li, try it. Thank you, young master. Aunt Li hurriedly took the cake and thanked him. Everyone looked over with envy and desire. They all wanted to know how the Marquis' rare thing was like. Aunt Li broke the cake piece by piece and handed it to the people around her. Each of them took a small bite and tasted it together. How is it? The people who did not get any asked anxiously. It's delicious. The people who ate it looked at each other and immediately nodded. If you want to eat it, make it yourself. It's all here. Bye. Ningchen glanced at the chefs and arrogantly left with the cake. Little Mingyu giggled and also left. The chefs looked at each other and had a headache trying to recall how the Marquis made it. This day was the most lively day in the Marquis' mansion, especially in the kitchen. From time to time, there were people's regretful voices. The cake was ruined again. Ningchen and little Mingyu enjoyed the fruits of their labor happily, ignoring the feelings of a large group of people in the mansion. The Empress is here. At this moment, the guard outside the door announced. It was the eldest grandson. Cough, cough. Ningchen was so scared that he choked on the cake and coughed violently. Hide. Ningchen immediately hid the cake in the cupboard and was about to run away in a panic. It's too late. Mingyu was also a little overwhelmed by the nervousness of the bad guy and said anxiously. What excuse did I give just now? Ningchen was so scared that his memory was not good and asked anxiously. Sick. Mingyu quickly replied. Yes, sick. Ningchen ran back to the inner room, took off his shoes and lay on the bed. He did not care whether it was hot or not and covered himself with 2 quilts. Empress. The maids in the mansion did not have time to retreat and knelt down nervously. Where is Ningchen? Zhang Sun asked angrily. The Marquis is in the room. A maid stammered. Qing Ning glanced at the mansion and could not help but feel strange. Why were there only these few people in the mansion? Clang. The door was pushed open. Zhang Sun entered the room and saw Ningchen lying on the bed. She sneered and asked Mingyu, what happened to him? Sick, sick. Affected by Ningchen, Mingyu was also fearful of the Empress of Great Xia and stammered. Imperial physician, check on the Marquis Jiming's illness. Zhang Sun glanced at the old imperial physician behind her and said coldly. Yes. The old imperial physician replied respectfully and quickly walked to the bedside to take Ningchen's pulse. Mingyu and Ningchen broke out in cold sweat. Zhang Suan's move was too ruthless. She even brought an imperial physician over. A moment later, the old imperial physician stood up and walked to Zhang Sun. He said respectfully, "Empress, the Marquis' pulse is slightly chaotic. It's a sign that he has not recovered from his injury. He just needs to be carefully treated. This Empress understands. You can go back." Zhang Sun said. "Yes, this official will take his leave." The old imperial physician bowed and left. Seeing the old imperial physician leave, Qing Ning hurriedly gave little Mingyu a look, indicating for a certain person on the bed to quickly confess. Unfortunately, it was too late. Zhang Sun walked forward and grabbed Ning Chen's ear. She said angrily, still pretending. "You're getting bolder and bolder. You dare to not go when this empress summons you." Little Mingyu took 2 steps back without any loyalty. This great Xia empress was too fierce. She did not dare to provoke her. Not far from the door, the maids were also frightened by the commotion in the room. In their impression, the empress was a gentle and virtuous person. Why was there such a big difference? In the room, Ning Chen knelt on the bed with his head down. He did not even dare to breathe. Qing Ning and little Mingyu retreated further and further away. No one dared to persuade him. They could only pray for the best. Zhang Sun scolded him for a while before sitting down to drink some water and catch her breath. Outside the manor, when the guards heard that the Marquis was scolded, they could not help but smack their lips. They were much more well-informed than others. They knew that the Marquis had just been scolded by the Empress in the Heavenly Mandate Palace 2 days ago. In less than 2 days, he was scolded again. "Where are the servants in your manor? Where did they go?" Zhang Sun suddenly remembered the situation when she entered the manor. There was such a great Marquis, but there was not even a shadow. In the kitchen, Ning Chen did not hesitate to sell everyone out. As the saying went, it was better to die than to die. Zhang Sun would not do anything to the others. At most, she would scold them. The cake was not eaten for free. They had to be scolded together. "What are they doing in the kitchen?" Zhang Sun frowned. "Making a cake," Ning Chen said honestly. Zhang Sun frowned again. What nonsense was this? What is a cake? In the corner of the room, Qing Ning whispered. "Food," Mingyu also whispered. "Ning Chen made it?" Qing Ning asked again. "We made it together," Mingyu whispered. "What are you whispering about?" Zhang Sun glanced at the two and said coldly. Ning Chen hurriedly gave little Mingyu a look. The little girl understood and ran back to the central room. She brought the cake over and put it on the table. Then, she retreated far away. "Did you make it?" Zhang Sun looked and asked. "Yes." Ning Chen nodded. Zhang Sun picked up a piece and took a bite. The taste was not bad. It was not worse than the snacks in the palace. "Why did you make this?" "Today is Mingyu's birthday, so I tried to make it," Ning Chen said honestly. Zhang Sun thought for a moment and glanced at little Mingyu. Then, she said, "Mingyu, come here." Mingyu was a bit scared, but she still walked over. She kept encouraging herself. She was the Empress. Who was she afraid of? Zhang Sun took a phoenix hairpin from her hair and put it in little Mingyu's hand. "I came out in a hurry today and didn't bring anything. This phoenix hairpin has been with Ben Gong for 20 years. Although you can't use it, it's a little token of Ben Gong's appreciation." Seeing this, Ning Chen muttered in his heart. "You gave it to the right person. I will definitely use it." "Thank you," Mingyu whispered as she held the phoenix hairpin. Zhang Sun smiled and did not say anything else. Mingyu was only a child. Moreover, she had been with this brat for so long. Whether it was as the Empress of Xia or as Ning Chen's elder, this gift could not be lacking. Although this brat was usually carefree, he was actually very narrow-minded. If she did not express it, he might say bad things about her behind her back. After saying this, Zhang Sun remembered something. She looked at Ning Chen, who was still kneeling on the bed, and asked calmly, I heard that you already went to Third Prince's Divine Wind Camp. Yes. Ning Chen nodded. How was it? Zhang Sun continued to ask. The military discipline is strict and there are many experts. It's very troublesome. Ning Chen's expression became serious. This third prince was not easy to deal with. Adding on the Divine Wind Camp, it would be very difficult to deal with. Chapter 139. With Grand Xia's current situation, both princes had to be careful. Any one of them could rebel at any time, so they had to be on guard. He had met the third prince before, and he had also gone to Lingyan Pavilion, which was related to the 10th prince. He realized that the water behind this was much deeper than he had imagined. Did you find anything in the imperial court? Zhang Sun asked with a serious expression. There aren't any concrete clues. The people in charge are all very tight-lipped. However, the death of Ying City's city lord was untimely. It must be related to one of the princes or the three dukes, Ning Chen said. Who do you suspect? Zhang Sun narrowed her eyes and asked. The 10th prince. Ning Chen sternly replied. This was the current situation. Duke Xiu supported the 10th prince, and the former head of the Department of Justice was on the 10th prince's side. It was very difficult for Xia Mingri to be cleared of suspicion. Zhang Sun frowned and said, Be careful. The 3rd prince and the 10th prince will continue to try to rope you in. Don't give in so easily. Don't worry, I know what to do, Ning Chen said calmly. Zhang Sun nodded. After feeling that there was nothing else to ask, she took out a golden dragon insignia and threw it on the bed. This is the commander's seal of the Dragon Guard Battalion. I'll leave it with you. If there's any trouble, you decide what to do. Ning Chen was slightly stunned. Looking at the insignia on the bed, his eyes flashed with disbelief. The imperial guards of the imperial city were different from other armies. Even if he was a martial Marquis, he could not easily mobilize them. The Martial Marquis' special authority of 100,000 soldiers had never included the 330,000 elite Imperial Guards. Zhang Sun giving him the commander's seal of the Dragon Guard Battalion was equivalent to entrusting him with her life. This was because more than 90% of the Imperial Guards in the Imperial Palace were soldiers of the Dragon Guard Battalion. This consort only has the Dragon Guard Battalion. The other 3 battalions are in Zi's hands. If there's anything, you can discuss it with Zi. This consort is a woman and cannot hold military power for a long time. Zhang Sun said calmly. Although her voice was soft, it gave Ning Chen an incomparably heavy pressure. Consort, aren't you afraid that I'll rebel? Ning Chen smiled bitterly. This consort is still alive. You don't have the guts, Zhang Sun replied indifferently. Ning Chen was helpless. Fine, he really didn't have the guts. It didn't matter if Zhang Sun had military power or not, it was the same. Since you've already been dragged into this, there's no need to be overly cautious. If anything happens, I'll take care of it. As long as I'm still alive, no one in the Imperial City will dare to touch you. Alright, I'm going back. There are still many things to do in the palace and I don't have time to stay here. With that, Zhang Sun got up and left. Before she left the room, she paused and said calmly, the cake is good. When you have time, go back to the palace and teach Qing Ning how to make it. Qing Ning glanced at Ning Chen, who was still kneeling on the bed, and a complicated look flashed across her eyes. Then, she followed after him. The two of them left in such a carefree manner that Ning Chen was left alone, unable to speak for a long time. Mingyu sat by the table and quietly watched the bad guy ponder in silence, not daring to disturb him. Your Highness, the burden you've given him is too heavy, Qing Ning said worriedly after leaving the Jiming Marquis residence. To others, these rites might be an honor that could only be chanced upon by luck, but to Ning Chen, it was only a burden. I know what to do, Zhang Sun sighed softly. This was the most difficult time for Great Xia. In these days, she had already felt that she was seriously powerless. Although Zi was trustworthy, he was too upright. Now, she could only entrust Ning Chen to her. She was very clear about what kind of person Ning Chen was. She didn't have the confidence to keep him by her side forever. She could only give him as much as she could and keep him for as long as possible. The only thing she could keep him with was trust, not power. In the northern Meng camp, Fan Lingyue sat in the commander's tent in deep thought, quietly considering every step of the deployment in the future. Northern Meng needed to cherish time. After all, this was Great Xia, and the longer they dragged it out, the better it was for Great Xia. No matter how smart a person was, they couldn't predict everything like a god. What they needed to grasp the most was not every detail, but the overall situation. The later Great Xia's internal problems erupted, the more time Great Xia had to catch its breath. In other words, Northern Meng's situation would become more serious. She needed to do something to make the decision-makers of Great Xia nervous. Qing Wuyo, Fan Lingyue said. Present. Qing Wuyo entered the tent and knelt down. Send someone to secretly contact the third prince of Great Xia. Tell him that I want to talk to him, Fan Lingyue ordered. Qing Wuyo was startled and subconsciously asked, what if he rejects? It doesn't matter. Whether it succeeds or not is not important to us. You just need to send someone over. If he rejects, continue to send someone to talk to him, Fan Lingyue instructed. Yes. Qing Wuyo received the order and left. He still didn't understand what the military advisor was trying to do. Fan Lingyue stood up and walked to the front of the tent, silently looking in the direction of Great Xia's imperial city. Today was Mingyue's birthday. Was she doing well? Cough cough. Suddenly feeling a tightness in her chest, Fan Lingyue covered her mouth and coughed lightly. Drops of blood flowed out and dripped down from her palm. Your body can't hold on for much longer. Unknowingly, Mu Qingxue walked in front of the commander's tent. She was dressed in white and her beautiful face was as calm and cold as before. It's fine. While speaking, Fan Lingyue's eyes flashed with exhaustion. No matter what, she had to hold on. She had already fought until here, she couldn't fall short. That Ning Chen is very powerful. You have to be careful, Mu Qingxue calmly reminded her. Ah! Fan Lingyue smiled tiredly. After a while, she slowly asked, Mu Qingxue, I've always been curious about something. Since you remember everything, why did you only forget about him? She had long known that Ning Chen had gone to Sword City. In this world, there were very few people who knew that Mu Qingxue was the one who had tried to assassinate Emperor Xia. Coincidentally, Ning Chen had entered the palace at that time. The two of them had met each other, which was logical but also inconceivable. Mu Qingxue's expression didn't change. He indifferently said, I naturally don't need to remember unimportant things. There's nothing to be curious about. Hearing this, Fan Lingyue smiled and didn't ask any more. What happened between them wasn't important to her. What was important was that Mu Qingxue represented Sword City. That was enough. In this world, anyone could surrender to Great Xia. Only Sword City couldn't. Therefore, she could still maintain her trust in Mu Qingxue and Sword City. Jiming Marquis Manor. After Zhang Sun left, Ning Chen didn't leave the manor for 2 days. During this time, Su Fian sent someone to send an invitation to Ning Chen, inviting him to participate in Yinhe's new courtesan gathering 3 days later. The top courtesan assembly was held once a year. It was very lively and was not inferior to the Lantern Festival. Every time, it would attract a large number of scholars and beauties. High officials and nobles in the imperial court were also not rare. Ning Chen looked at the invitation and casually threw it to the side. Ming Yu curiously took it and looked at it. She asked, what kind of place is this Lingyan Pavilion? A brothel. Ning Chen honestly replied. Ming Yu purposely dragged out her voice. Her small face was full of disdain. A bad person was indeed a bad person. He even received this kind of invitation. Little girl, what are you thinking about? Didn't I tell you before that I stayed there for a period of time? Ning Chen unhappily said. You also didn't say it was a brothel. Mingyu continued to look down on him. I didn't say. Ning Chen was astonished. You didn't say. Mingyu nodded with certainty. Ning Chen rubbed his nose. Could it be that he really didn't say? He had said too many words to fool people. He really couldn't recall them all at once. Are you prepared to go? Mingyu asked quietly. Do you want to go? Ning Chen didn't answer, but asked back. Mingyu hesitated for a moment, but in the end, curiosity won over reason. She nodded and said, yes. Then let's go. Ning Chen smiled lightly. Bringing a child to a brothel, this was probably something only he would do. However, the courtesan gathering was different from usual. At least there weren't so many unsightly things. It would be good to let little Mingyu join in the fun. Moreover, this courtesan gathering came at such an opportune time. If he didn't go, he would be letting down the people behind this. 3 days passed quickly. Before the third day even turned dark, Mingyu impatiently wanted to leave. Ning Chen pulled little Mingyu and carefully covered up any traces of a girl. Only then did he feel assured and lead the latter out of the manor. Do you know how the courtesan gathering is chosen? Mingyu asked curiously as they walked. I don't know. Ning Chen shook his head. He really didn't know how the courtesan gathering was chosen. However, this thing should be similar to the beauty pageants in the modern world. It was just a show and then a bunch of people would vote. Why don't we buy a courtesan gathering and bring her home? Mingyu's face was full of anticipation. Why buy her? She can't do any work. Even if we buy her, she'll just be a vase. Ning Chen wasn't very interested. Mingyu thought about it. That was true. Courtesan gathering sounded nice, but it really wasn't very useful. The two of them chatted as they walked. Finally, when the moon rose, they reached the banks of the Yin River. The bustling crowd in front of them really gave the two of them a fright. Large and small flower boats were motionless in the middle of the river. The largest flower boat in the middle was surrounded by many smaller flower boats. It was brightly lit and extremely lively. Because the large boat in the middle had limited space, other than a few high officials and nobles who already had invitations, everyone else had to pass the test on the surrounding boats before they were qualified to board the large boat where the courtesan gathering would be held. Mingyu, give me the invitation. In front of a small boat, Ning Chen spoke. It was great to have an invitation. They didn't need to line up or fight monsters to pass. They could directly go to the last boat and eat while pleasing their eyes. Mingyu was stunned. Immediately, her face showed a hint of embarrassment. She said embarrassedly, I left in a hurry and forgot to take it. Ning Chen's eyes darkened and he almost fell down. How could this little ancestor forget such an important thing? Make way, make way. A large group of people behind him squeezed onto the boat and entered to take the test. Mingyu looked at the surrounding crowd and was a little scared. She carefully said, why don't we go back and take it? Seeing that there wasn't much time left and that the courtesan gathering was about to begin, Ning Chen made up his mind. He gritted his teeth and said, no need. We'll go through. Isn't it just a few tests? We'll just go through them. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.